I would like to invite Brian Wood to lead off our first workshop item about aquatic facility feasibility.
All right, good afternoon. Oh, there we go. Or I'm sorry, good evening, Mayor and Council. This evening we have two representatives from sports facilities. They have done a an aquatic study briefly, but really also a turf and facility study for us back in 2021. And based off of Council's request for us to look at moving forward or what it would look like for an aquatic center to be here in Auburn, we have asked them to share a little bit more about what they identified in the study, what it would look like to move forward with additional information and studies, and ultimately what it would take to move forward with an aquatic center. So without further delay, I would like to thank George and Susan for being with us this evening and welcome them. They have graciously joined us this evening, and I'll hand it over for them to introduce themselves. And they've put together a little bit of slide deck based off of some information and some questions that we shared with them last week. So thank you guys for pulling that together as well. So I'll hand it over.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. I'm Suzanne Fisher-Reeder. I'm with Sports Facilities Companies, and joining me tonight is George Dinas with Councilman Hunsanger. We were in your community in 2021 and did a feasibility and market study for an athletic facility. If you'll let us, I put together just a couple of slides to remind you what we've done with that work, and then I'll turn it to George and he can have some discussion about aquatics. If you'll give me just a second to share my screen. Wonderful. So can everyone see my screen? Yes. Perfect. Okay. Just going to cover a couple of items tonight. We want to review what we at Sports Facility and Councilman Hunsanger did in 2021, really look at those aquatic needs in Auburn, what that return on investment may be, what we've seen with aquatic model financing, and what some of the benefits are of aquatics within communities. A little bit about us. Again, we were engaged in 2001. I'm with Sports Facilities Companies. We're based out of Clearwater, Florida. We were founded in 2003, and we work with advisory, development, and management within our facilities. That's everything from initial project planning all the way through management of facilities. We're working with $15 billion in funded projects. We're at 50 facilities across the country. And just to give you a little background there, Councilman Hunsanger is with George. George works with them. They started in 1970, based in St. Louis, 1,500 plus projects. As you can see on the map, they have worked all over the country. And I'll let him chat a little bit about CH and give you a little more of their background.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for the time. As Susie mentioned, I'm George Dinas with Councilman Hunsaker. We specialize in aquatic facility planning and design. And so we team with Sports Facilities Companies on a variety of projects that include both, indoor and outdoor water. Have been teaming with them for probably close to 15 years now, have completed over 40 projects with them. And so our firms work really well together because they specialize in the sports complex and dry side amenities, and then we specialize in the aquatics. So it makes sense for us to come together and team on a project like this.
So George was with us when we were in market in 2021 as well. And coming out of that initial meeting that we held with your stakeholders, your staff, members of your community, we really dove into what would a facility overall in Auburn really need to accomplish to be successful. And what we heard and what we built our model on at that point in time was creating a best-in-market asset that featured diverse, multi-generational, and flexible programming capabilities. So as that sports, dry, turf, aquatics, to really be a driver of economic impact to support your local businesses and your local community, and to provide and create a business model that created a path to long-term sustainability. And what does that look like without lots of subsidies? What would that long-term sustainability look like? We dove in 2021, really looked at your market with your population. We consider that 10, 15, 30 minute to be your local population, your 60 minute, 90 minute to be that regional, and your 240 is to really be a large, your general region that we would bring in for tournaments and events. We looked at your growth in your population. You do have anticipated population growth over the next 5 years, which is wonderful. Your median household age, right there at the national average. That's great. That shows that you have a large number of potential participants in your community. Median household income, slightly below than what the national average is. It's actually adjusted since we developed this in 2021. And then you do have spending. That last line is what people in your market are willing to spend for intro classes. So whether that's intro to learn basketball, intro to swim, intro to, those are, you do have a tendency for people to spend below the national average, but they're still willing to spend. So those are positive things that we looked at. We also looked at population density and what does that look like? So within 15 minutes, there are about 60,000 people. Of that, 14,000 children under the age of 14, 29,000 people under the age of 55. Within that age group is that 23,000. So those are things that we look at as we look at the market to say, what kind of facility and can the market support a facility? So after we did all of that, we dove in to what that market opportunity looks like on the athletics side. So we presented two models to the Auburn team. The first model was an indoor turf multi-sports model. So it was a hybrid turf model with basketball, volleyball, fitness, and support spaces, about 120,000 square feet. Estimate opinion of cost at that point in time was about $27 million. We looked at a second model that was a full turf model. So the full turf model made the assumption that Ingersoll went away and it replaced Ingersoll. So that was full turf, basketball, and some others, about 146,000 square feet, roughly $31.5 million opinion of cost at that point in time. We did show the financial expectation for that facility. It didn't cover debt service, not all of it, but it was operationally projected to be positive in year two. So year two moving on, year one, it did have a subsidy for operations, but year two moving on, it did perform positively on the operations side. That was with tournaments, events, programming. We really broke it down into business units for each of those models. On the aquatic side, George and his team put together a recommendation based on what they saw in the Maine specific swimming overview, the market analysis for swimming, what a facility in Auburn could potentially look like, either independently or as a phase in an overall sports complex that really would meet all the needs of the community. And it was about a 28,000 square foot facility, 8-lane, 25-yard competition pool with roughly 3,000 square feet of leisure programming pool space. So that secondary pool, they can regulate pool temperatures. At that point in time, their cost estimate was about $15.8 million. And so further on the CH side, they looked at needs and what that competition in the market looked like. So based on, I can turn to George, but based on their experience, they need approximately roughly 220 square feet for every 1,000 residents or so. There is definitely a need for more competitive swimming venues in Maine, but there has been a decline in competitive registered swimmers in Maine. So as you can see, you're under about 400 registered swimmers in 2021, down from a good number, 1,100 in 2018. What does that mean? Well, just means that there may not be as many people who are registering to swim, but there's a new aquatics facility, or there was at Colby College, that was hosting short and long-term or long course events. The Lewiston Y also provided area, about 3,400 square feet in pool space and a 6-lane lap pool. And then Bates College as well was providing about 4,000 square feet with an 8-lane lap pool. In your region, just so you can generally see where some of the competition may be with indoor and outdoor aquatic spaces, typically users who are daily users, prefer to drive 20 minutes or so, no more than 20 minutes to get to their daily workout that they have in a pool. For competition, you're looking at that 3 and 4 hours. So that's that 2 hour, that's, that 240-mile radius or so that we look at for competition. But in your market alone, George identified about 19 different facilities that could be considered some type of competition. That's, where they all are, everything from, Portland down into, very small for me, down into Cumberland Center, over into Westbrook, Manchester, Brunswick. So just to give you an idea of what some of those other aquatic spaces in Maine are and what they look like. And then to talk about financing and what we see in sports complexes and aquatic complexes. So we actually see the gamut of public-private, and then private models. Everything from joint use agreements with school districts, private businesses, your YMCA type model, medical providers that either assist with the initial construction or the long-term operations through a lease agreement or a partnership agreement for physical therapy and some spaces like that. 70 to 80% of aquatic facilities are subsidized. The range of subsidy really depends on the schedule, the rental rates, the types of memberships that people are able and willing to use in those facilities. Outdoor aquatic facilities usually are open for a shorter period of time and have more ability to recover some of their costs. Again, they're not outdoor. They don't have the indoor utilities and things that they would have to cover 12 months out of the year. For sports facilities, over 70% of the facilities that we are in development for or have developed include some kind of outside or private partnership, interlocal agreement, or partnership in general, whether that's a sponsorship, a medical provider, or a school provider that comes together with a local municipality or a local county to build and utilize a facility. It's essential to understand that additional revenue assets, whether that's turf that can be leased, entertainment space like family entertainment space, food and beverage, whether that's an outside restaurant provider or even just general concessions, that those elements are essential to supplement the operational income of the facility and the potential of that facility to meet not only the needs of the community, but to really provide the most potential to generate revenue. And important to look at too, what is that return on investment? What is that community benefit that a facility, a sports and recreation facility with an aquatics component, what does that actually mean to your community? Well, one, it would encourage the overall health and wellness of your community, whether that's with drowning prevention and water safety, lifeguard and CPR classes and careers. That is a huge area that the country itself is lacking in, and that you could be at forefront of leading that. Whether it's lessons within the school district as an educational component in that second grade or first grade class, all the way through users for swim teams with middle school and high school, aquatic fitness that spans generations, everything from your middle school fitness up to your seniors and intergenerational programming that happens. Again, master swim, so that 50 and over swim group, physical therapy, community swim, dive teams. Your public safety element may be able to use the facility as well for educational opportunities for their dive team. And then rentals and community events, ways to really bridge the community together, whether that's rentals for the birthday parties or community float-in movie nights and events. There are potential benefits for healthcare savings for your communities as your health and wellness increases. And there is potential at different age groups for reduction in savings. Property values adjacent to parks and recreation facilities and assets typically have increased property value. And then wanted to talk briefly about swimming lessons. And I know I mentioned it a second ago, but if you can reduce the risk of drowning in your community, that would be a huge community benefit. Maine is ranked 16th in the country for drownings per 100,000 deaths, little over 300 deaths a year with drownings in Maine. Children 1 to 4, again, that is one of the highest causes of death for children 1 to 4, and from 5 to 14, it's the second cause of death. So if you could do anything in a facility with a pool to help reduce those numbers, that would be a huge benefit to you and your immediate community and your surrounding community. The facility like this, sports, fitness, aquatics, would also create jobs in your community. So full-time and part-time. Part-time that you could work together with your local institutions, your high school, your college, your community college, to work with that path of students who are on a recreation or a sports wellness or a fitness, to really bring them in, do practicums within the facility, and then work to part-time and full-time employment. Youth engagement as well. Economic impact with the events and tournaments that you could bring in, to bring people into your community that may not be there except for this specific facility, and truly to strengthen your community identity. A way for Auburn to put themselves on the map and say, you know, we've got this amazing new sports, fitness, wellness facility that will supplement the facilities we already have and make you the leader in sports and recreation in Maine. So kind of just an overall highlight of our past work, understanding that you have had a conversation and a discussion and kind of want to think about what that aquatic element may look like, and really to guide you and give you some information that we've looked at previously, but I think is at the forefront of some of your conversations that you've had or are going to have in the future. And so with that, I just wanted to provide a quick overview. And George and I are here to answer questions that you may have. Please don't hesitate.
Well, first of all, on behalf of the City Council and staff, I'd like to thank you again, Susan, for coming back, and George, great to see you and hear from you. I can't believe it's been 2 years since you were here last. But thank you again for this overview. This is some great data. I have one question, then I'd like to turn it over. We talk about ROI from a financial standpoint too. And full disclosure, I used to work at about 3 of those pools you had up on the screen in admin way back in the day. That was the only thing an infantryman could get hired for as a lifeguard back in the late 90s, 2000s. So I'm familiar with the programming, costs, and so forth. But what does the ROI look like from a municipal? And let's just go through, and Frank, I've looked at some of your ROI analysis you have online from CH. Imagine the scenario of municipal-owned rental options to third-party groups with a school component as well. So that type of hybrid, I think, is more in line with what's normally happening within Maine.
Yeah, so I would say that, most municipal aquatic facilities are subsidized. There's a lot of factors that go into that, like you mentioned, in terms of partnerships and rentals, how the facility is programmed and operated. Personnel dollars are going to be, 40 to 60% of your cost. Utilities, are going to run another 30% most likely. And so a lot of it just, we like to talk about right sizing and finding that ideal type of facility that can generate the most amount of revenue from, programs. Community fitness can be that community asset like Susie talked about, but then also can be a little bit leaner on the expense side, and some of that is incorporating some sustainable design within the pool mechanical system. A lot of it will, really depend on hours of operation and, how efficient the design is in terms of staffing. We like to make sure that we design something that's going to be efficient, not only on the operational side, back of house pumps and motors, but also on the staffing side, since that's going to be a large portion of the cost. And then it's really about, maximizing the number of people that utilize the facility, for the benefit of their health and wellness and learn to swim and all of those different avenues of aquatic programs that really help the community to stay healthy and fit throughout their entire life, which is that's the beauty of aquatics, right? You can do it from 6 months till however old you make it. Aquatics is great for that. And so, but most municipal facilities are subsidized if you can couple it, like Susie mentioned, with some type of dry land fitness, and a more overall community center, then it's definitely capable of reaching sustainability.
Yeah, I would just reiterate the same. If you have those supplemental items, whether that's fitness, rental rooms, or that medical lease space, that will help you get closer to operational sustainability.
Thank you so much. Really quick question about, it sounds like we're pricing out a short course pool versus kind of a long, and the meters are 25 versus 50, and it sounds like 8 lanes. Is there more significant ROI having a difference between short course versus long?
Yeah, I think the big thing that led us to the short course was number one, the recent opening, recent, within a couple of years now of Colby College up in Waterville, opening their first indoor 50-meter pool within the state of Maine that our company got to design the pools for. And then the second was just really the population density. We just didn't really think necessitated a long course pool. With a 50-meter pool, you not only get the ability to do long course swimming, but then you get 18 to 22 cross course 25-yard lanes, and that's really the value of the 50-meter pool. But we usually want to see roughly at least 100,000 people within a community before we feel that there's that level of tolerance to support an indoor 50-meter pool through a wide variety of different groups and clubs and teams, from high school swimming to USA club swimming to masters swimming, as well as just general community demand for that size of a pool. So that's really where we determined that short course pool would be the right fit. I think there'd be a lot of unused capacity with a long course pool if you went that way.
Question, I want to follow up with what you just said about community and 100,000. How are you defining community here in this study? Auburn is obviously geographically large. We've got 26,000 plus or minus people, but in the county, I don't know, maybe the mapping you had, if you brought that up, might help, but I believe a 30-minute drive is 115,000 people within the county, Androscoggin County. And right now, correct me if I'm wrong, we have the YWCA and limited opportunities within Bates College, but those are the only aquatics facilities in the county. And then north and west of us, Franklin and Oxford County, probably combined another 60 to 80,000 people. And I don't believe, and if your analysis shows otherwise, any aquatic facility in the Tri-County area.
Correct, yeah. And so we were really looking Auburn specific, and then in those radius of the 15 to 30-minute drive times. And so, yeah, we did find that, there was a high population density within, especially when you got out to the 30 minutes. But what we also find is that that just the 30-minute drive time is a little bit more difficult for daily users of the facility. Though we also know, I was just in a community the other day where parents are driving an hour and a half round trip to take their kids to swim practice on a daily basis, so it is conceivable that, there could be that type of demand. But I think when we also looked at the population, we also coupled it with just the overall numbers within Maine Swimming, which is the local swim committee for USA Swimming. And, in some of those, we call them LSCs, the local swim committee, which is the regions that USA Swimming breaks the country up into for competitive aquatics. In some of those LSCs, we'll see, 3,000, 5,000, 8,000 competitive swimmers, where within Maine, it was, at that 1,000 mark and trending down. Now that was 2021, where, lack of access to indoor pools really hurt USA Swimming in terms of participation. And we've seen that bump back up now post, 2021. But I feel that there's probably, we'd have to take a look at it again, and that might be something viable to look at, in a study, with determining if, maybe that 8 lanes is not the sweet spot anymore. Maybe it's 10, 12, 14, or maybe even a 50-meter, just depending upon the numbers for competitive swimming and really the tolerance of the wider community to drive on for daily usage for the indoor 50-meter pool.
One last question. Do we, and again, I was never a swimmer, so I do apologize if my question is kind of off the wall, but are most competitions done or completed or conducted in the short lanes, or are they mainly looking for longer, tracks? How does that work?
Yeah, so USA Swimming is really divided up into 2 seasons. The short course season, which is September to essentially April, and that goes for NCAA swimming as well. All NCAA meets are conducted in the short course 25-yard. And then the long course season, the Olympic distance, is going to be April to August. And so over 80% of meets are short course meets throughout the year, since the long course season is, only that April to August timeframe, and in general, just because there's, a lack of 50-meter pools around the country compared to a short course pool. But, the main bulk of competitive swimming is done in that short course distance.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No, I'd like to thank you very much, Brian. Did you have anything or follow-ups?
Back in 2021 and the updated numbers for today, and really just kind of for council thinking about next steps, what that would look like based on the order and directive. Counselor.
Quick, has this facility, have there been a combo, has it been looked at as in combo, that we had just the dry facility and then they were talking about just an aquatic facility, but is there numbers for the whole thing?
I believe, and sorry, Susie, you look like you were going to say something.
Is there any economy of scale, in other words, if
Was it
2 separate
So what
facilities?
we
The
looked
large
at
one?
in 2021 were the indoor facilities. So that was the courts, the surfaces,
Correct.
the hard facility, the turf. We looked at that because that was your greatest need in 2021. It did not include what the financial would look like for the aquatics. That was not deemed with your project.
Correct.
Being one of those items. That was a future phase that they would wanted to get to at a later point, really, to meet those initial needs.
Correct. And my question
Right
is,
off the bat.
in a combo facility, if we did both and had part of it being an aquatic, is there, because there was 15 million and 30 million, so is there economies of scale?
Center and an ice arena, there are some benefits to being able, again, kind of the behind the scenes pumps and so forth, or using some of the heat and energy from an ice arena. There are some benefits that we would look at, and I think that that's something that we would drill down into a little bit more as we look at greater specifics. Again, the 2021 study didn't focus on that, but there are some examples out there, and I think they would be able to speak to what those are and the benefits and challenges to both.
Thank you.
If I could, to add on to Councilor Milks, George, you did an analysis. I actually found it through a Google search. Austin, Texas, municipal pool with school department. It was a great financial model. And it really broke down your costs, operating costs on a per lane, per hour basis, and your revenue on a per lane, per hour. Is that something that is standardized that we could actually tweak a little bit to fit some scenarios within Auburn, so we could actually look at what that subsidy deficit would be on an annualized basis?
Yeah, that's definitely something we could take a look at. And those rental rates vary across the country. Austin is a little bit of a unique area, just as it's always consistently named within, one of the top 10 to 15 swim communities within the country. Plus there's a lack of indoor water there. Even in a lot of ways, there's a lack of outdoor water there. And so, we could definitely, do something specific to Auburn that looks at what would those annual operating expenses be? What would the potential for revenue be? Take into consideration all of those different areas. Susie mentioned on one of her slides that the majority of their projects involve some type of partnership, interlocal agreement, and we find the same thing for indoor aquatics. That it's going to be a swim club, it's going to be collegiate, athletics. It's going to be school district. It's going to be a municipality. Could be county government. Could be a YMCA or YWCA. And so we find the same thing with aquatics.
Great. Again, I would definitely like to thank you both for taking time this evening. With council, if I can just get a general nod, if this is the correct process for kind of next steps, looking at a community conversation around what an aquatics facility would mean and could look like here in Auburn, looking at and identifying potential locations, exploring partnerships. I think we all know that there are a number of great organizations that would probably be interested in being a part of this, and then coming back on October 16th. And I think that would also allow a parallel track to engage with Susan and George and their team on, I think, some specifics and some detailed questions that obviously we don't have the subject matter expertise on, to provide a more robust, up-to-date outlook and some more details. Does that sound like the appropriate next steps?
Yeah, I would prefer to see the YMCA, which provided a community pool for years, do this. I think the city should stay out of it. I believe that because we're asking the taxpayers to support a $45 million bond issue for a public safety facility, that this is strategically an error on the part of the city council to pursue this at this time.
I think the question on the table is basically, at this point, not whether to pursue or not to pursue, but is that the course of action that makes sense as you formulate a decision, as you get closer? Is it worth exploring further?
We didn't say we're buying it. We said we're looking at it, and I think we can do things in parallel tracks. That's my opinion on it.
And I think what we'll certainly do is pursue and lean heavy on the partnership side of things, to really explore all avenues there, if that's the will and direction of council.
Yeah, I mean, I think we certainly would have to get creative with financing, but looking at the project on the surface, I think that it's worth looking into a little bit closer and seeing what it looks like. I mean, maybe we do it, maybe we don't, but let's find out.
So we'll take those steps, and we'll partner with Susie and George and Mark, obviously internally, to see all the creative ways that financing might be possible.
Brian, I would like to speak.
Absolutely, Councilor.
Do we actually have to get rid of every part of the old Edward Little? Is there any way we could salvage any part of the building that
No.
there's nothing, not even the new sections?
No.
Because, I mean,
Yeah.
because to me, it would be more prudent if we could put some form of swimming pool in a building that already exists, even if it is contaminated, because we are getting money to fix the contamination.
The only way to fix contamination is to tear it down. I was absolutely take that to the bank. I was with the governor's office and director of education. That is the remediation with Harriman and so forth. It's in the building. It's not sequestered. It needs to be demolished and then freighted to Ohio.
Council, I wouldn't get into the details of whether or not, that could have or may have been able to happen. The concern now is it's too late. It's already, that is already done, and the work is being done now to demo that building. The bond's been set. The state has provided the funding, so most of the funding. So that may have been able to be explored, but it won't be able to be explored now.
All right. Thank you very much. So Susie and George, thank you again, and we'll be in touch very soon.
Great, thanks.
Have a great evening.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
all.
Have
Thank
a
you.
great evening.
All right, bye.
Next, Brian, you still have it with a public safety update.
Yeah, I would ask Jill and both chiefs to come up front table here and be available.
All right. So yeah, this is nothing new to council. Just wanted to provide a little bit of an update and share with you, I think, some information and give a visual on the public safety facility and the current state of the facilities right now. So first, I'd like to play a little video, and then we'll get into a Q&A session. Oh, just kidding. That's not it. Sorry, I thought Jim downloaded the video. Hold on one sec. Let me go grab Jim.
Jim, can you just take over the computer and see if you can find that and play it for us?
Yeah, he should be able to. Oh, there you go. No. Jim, the public safety facility?
Folks, we're going to take a 5-minute break here just to get some videos propped up, AV issues. So we'll take a 5-minute recess.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. They, I mean, I didn't want the job. We talked in local tax years, especially when I was short.
What's his, he must need that time for his. Well, I think he's over.
I know.
I need to log in. Can't play it.
What's that?
Say I need to log in. He can't
Well, try
play.
opening it now, see what happens with your sitting there.
Hmm.
He's right there. It's inside look, ABDFD.
Oh yeah, where is that? Oh. I don't know. See.
What is that agenda pad? Is that our agenda or did he delete it?
The
Bottom agenda pad?
oh yeah, that's yeah, that's this
It's got
one.
a link. See where it's highlighted? It's got a box. Is
Yep.
that a link?
Yes. Well, that's not leading anywhere. You know what? I think if I log into my email from here, I think I have the one that lists it.
I don't think you can do it.
Oh, my email account?
Log in there, yeah. And you've got the ads up.
Hmm. Oh, I forgot it. There.
Hey, I didn't. Crazy. They, well, they're usually callable. Yeah, if we write them, which means them. Yeah, I mean, you can't generally do it for them. So, and probably,
All right.
no, not at all.
All right. I think we're ready.
Yeah.
Starts it. There we go. Yeah. Yep. All right.
Okay, folks, welcome back. I'd like to turn over to Chief Chase, Jill, and Chief Moen. Excuse us, guys. Hey, excuse me? We're in a meeting now. Okay, thank you. So if we could turn it over to you for the workshop, and it's yours.
All right. Oh, for the love of Pete. Oh. Yeah. Let's see. No. All right. Pause 1 second.
Hey, Jim, why don't you come in the community room and fix the sound?
Okay, connect. I'm not gonna break it. Oh.
While we're waiting for that video to spool up, what that video does is it's a highlight reel of some of the challenges that we're facing in our current conditions. And we'll be using this as part of our public awareness campaign with the citizens of Auburn. And it really highlights some of the struggles that we face and hopefully make people understand the need for a new public safety facility for us. Well,
Yep.
Are we waiting to see something, or are we starting the workshop?
You
or
know, I
what?
think we're going to start it. We did the video. I think everybody has some questions. I'll open up, Mr. Milks.
So, Mike, fully in support of the public safety building. It's clearly we need it. I do have a concern, and if you have a plan for the downtown area post being out, and I think your presence down here makes it a safer place. So do you have plans that once you're out of here, I worry about the parking garage at night, I worry about the alleys and that kind of thing. And so have you given that any thought?
Sure, absolutely. Excuse me. Part of our patrolling strategies moving forward, once we've relocated, we'll be doing building site checks. We do those at night on various facilities throughout the city. So that would be just part of the routine of the patrol officers assigned to this area. Court Street serves as our boundary between two of our patrol districts. So you've got actually officers overlapping Court Street. So we'd be ensuring that we're still in the downtown area, especially later at night with the restaurants and whatnot. So we'll definitely have some officers' presence down here for sure.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, so when I look at this, I think we're kind of missing something here. So I know I'm just talking about funding now, not the building. The building makes sense to me, but the funding is where I really get stuck up here. So I know that the council has approved a TIF or two, and I know that there's TIF money to go towards a public safety facility. So to me, what I'm seeing is the price tag for the whole facility is 45 million, and that looks like what we're looking to bond. So where's the gap between what we have in available funding through TIFs and any other funding that the city has at their fingertips, as well to how much do we actually need to bond for? Because I'm thinking it's not 45, and I'll ask more questions later.
I'll start, then I'll have Jill chime in. So you're right. The bond amount hopefully will not be 45 million. Even if you look at the new high school, when we set out to bond the new high school, Jill, we broke it into two different bonds. Do you remember what our total amount was?
125 million.
And that was a $140 some odd million project. So you're right. We won't bond the full amount is what we're hoping. When you go out to referendum, though, you need to have, you don't want to go back out again. And so that is, when you look at the language, it's up to 45 million. It shall not exceed 30 years, even though the numbers that you're seeing in the information sheet and the bond numbers, that's actually set for a 20-year bond, but it's not to exceed. It allows you to, in the way that we do our bonds, it allows for Jill, as she's paying attention. I mean, Jill was able to save on the school a considerable amount of money. One, market was very different, but also paying attention and speaking with our bond counsel, we were able to move a little quicker on one of the school bonds, which certainly helped us out greatly. We ended up locking in at 0.8% on the first one.
The first one was 1.73.
Well, total that's
Yeah.
the total value of the coupon would have been
Yeah.
1.73. So
Yeah.
so by doing that saved a considerable amount of money on that project. What we can do is we can call a bond, and if it looks like in 10 years rates make sense, we want to call that bond, we can call that bond,
And do a refinance.
do a refinance on that bond, and potentially save some additional funds. So there's some opportunities there, but the language is set out so that it's up to that 45 million. We know that we already have 2.5 million from some congressional earmark funds that will be applied to that. That will certainly help bring that down. But all those it's important for us to make sure that, and through speaking with bond counsel, is that your maximums of what you're putting in the referendum. And then the work then will be to reduce that.
And then ongoing, I'm assuming that the TIF money goes towards the bond payments.
So you've been allocating, since the state allowed for TIF funds to be applied, 15% to be applied towards public safety. That has been going, and we've been pulling those. Now, those are pretty small at this point because we haven't had a lot of projects, and they've only been for a very short period of time. Now, as we get towards the end of the 20 years on this bond, there'll obviously be more in there. We'll be pulling that. Those are probably annually is what Jill will do, is look to pull those, to apply those to the actual payment. So it helps reduce the payment. So
So we can put the TIF funds towards the payment of the bond.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
what the voters are voting on is that you are voting to bond this amount. How you pay for it, the voters aren't voting on that. That's something that you'll be doing here as a council.
There wasn't a regulatory thing against
Yep.
that or something.
This is what you'll be doing here as a council through your budget process, but also what, Councilor Staples, does that answer that for you?
I mean, I think I agree with Councilor Staples that the need is obvious. So, I mean, I'm appreciate you putting the video together, but I think we all know the need is obvious, so.
And just a reminder, I mean, today we have an order to place this on the November ballot. You know, by charter, we are capped at the amount that the council can authorize in bonding based upon a percentage of the overall budget. Everything else needs to go to the voters to decide. So, you know, that's what that vote will be for later on. And, you know, I have some questions too, because, you know, just to provide information, and it's not necessarily need, and it's really focused on the financial aspect. And it's about the financial sustainability of the city of Auburn primarily. When we're looking at how much, you know, we have historically had in bonds, not including the interest rates or, you know, the state reimbursement on school, for example. But you, Jill, I know you did specifically a great job bringing that overall bonded amount, and the previous councils pre-2017, in retiring debt. And we brought it down, I think it was like $25 million. In order to absorb that 15. And I do believe we have some other bonds that are now set to retire this year or next year on City Hall.
So we've already retired Auburn Hall. We've retired Mechanics Row, parking garage. We have, in the next couple years, we'll have the library that will retire. And then we'll also have Park Avenue School. And I think one other school bond probably in the next 4 years.
So I think the question is, right now, last fiscal year, we had in our budget payments for those bonds. Now, when we retire those, and let's say the combined payments were, around $1 million. Now we retire those, we stop paying that $1 million. We carry that over to public safety in 2 or 3 years. For example, what is our net increase in, you know, needed money to offset the public safety building? In other words, if we assume that, you know, we're always going to pay that debt, I look at it as almost like a car payment, right? You're always going to, hopefully not, but most people always have a car payment, right? But they trade in their cars. You know, what could that be? And I don't expect an answer right now, of course. It's a lot. That's math. But if we could get that answer, I think that's an important component. Because if we're looking at $45 million, okay, but are we looking at what is a net increase to the taxpayers in order to cover this cost?
Right. Well, and one of the things that we've talked about is not necessarily bonding all of the 45 million up front, because it's going to take a couple of years to build that building, just like it did Edward Little High School. And so we split that Edward Little into 2 pieces.
Public safety professionals face each day. Welcome to Central Station, also known as Engine 3. Located at 555 Minot Avenue, this facility was built in 1972. Fire operations run 24/7 here, and this station is also home to AFD's administrative offices. While it was considered cutting edge when it was built, Central Station no longer meets the challenges of a contemporary...
Yeah, if we, we'll find out, I'll work with the architects and what have you to find out what the cash flow is going to be on this project. And then there's no sense having $20 million here that we're not touching and paying interest on. So, and maybe the interest rates will go down within the next...
Thank you for joining the City of Auburn for this brief tour of Auburn's Central Fire Station and the Auburn Police Department. We'd like to show you around to help identify some of the challenges our public safety professionals face each day. Welcome to Central Station, also known as Engine 3. Located at 555 Minot Avenue, this facility was built in 1972. Fire operations run 24/7 here, and this station is also home to AFD's administrative offices. While it was considered cutting edge when it was built, Central Station no longer meets the challenges of a contemporary and diverse fire service. Cancer and cardiovascular disease are the leading causes of firefighter death. Some of the biggest challenges facing the AFD in this facility are health risks due to lack of decontamination spaces, the proximity of the garage bays to the living and sleeping quarters, and a lack of adequate storage. Sleeping and showering facilities do not accommodate the needs of a diverse workforce. It has been difficult to prioritize gender privacy and accessibility in our current facility. Training is critically important for first responders. However, this training room is not large enough to accommodate the entire staff, not to mention that it competes for space with the in-house gym. Storage at Central Fire is challenging, to say the least. There is a need for gear storage space that isolates our team from contaminated gear and from diesel exhaust fumes. Our live fire training facility, while unique and impressive, is not NFPA compliant. As you can see, protecting our staff from carcinogens, providing decontamination space for firefighters, as well as areas to clean and store their gear, are among our greatest challenges here at Central Fire. Welcome to the Auburn Police Department, currently located in Auburn City Hall at 60 Court Street. All APD employees work from this location, and while this is a beautiful building, it presents some unique challenges for our law enforcement professionals. Auburn Hall was not designed with police operations in mind. In addition to sharing the building with other municipal departments and visitors to City Hall, one of the biggest challenges in this location is the physical separation of our staff. The patrol division works from the basement of the building, parking their cruisers in the courtyard and garage, while detectives, support services, professional standards, and administration all work from the third floor of the building. Modern law enforcement agencies are diverse, and ours is no exception. Undersized locker rooms, lack of privacy, cramped quarters, and storage constraints are frustrating and can affect morale, productivity, and our ability to attract new employees. Storage is another significant challenge facing the APD. From evidence and records to police equipment, uniforms, and supplies, storage at Auburn Hall is less than ideal for our team. "14 years ago, the Auburn PD's move to City Hall was intended to be a temporary solution. However, this building does not meet the needs of our community law enforcement agency and its officers. You'll be hearing more about Auburn's public safety building project in the months to come. To learn more or to connect with our teams, visit auburnmaine.gov.
So as I said earlier, I think the video kind of shows the challenges that we're facing. The flooding area in the parking garage there was from the July storm where we got the 5 inches of water in 45 minutes. So those are the challenges that we're facing. And I think it's important as we talk to our citizens as we move forward is to highlight that, you know, Auburn is growing. Auburn is growing and changing at a rapid pace. And we need to make sure that we're investing in our infrastructure to be able to sustain that growth.
I just add a couple of things that we've talked about that weren't really covered in the video, particularly around operations. And one thing that we're really looking to gain out of a public safety building is our ability to have our tower truck in that district, right? The current station does not support it. And that's really the district that would be best served by that tower truck. There's some disservice or challenges with service having that up to Center Street and the rural areas that it needs to cover. And it's really operationally better to be central in the city, and having a facility that would support that is big to operations. And then lastly, I think we could both say, as a little additional benefit to this, we and lots of public safety departments throughout the state, they're all struggling with staffing needs, and certainly, it's their workplace, and lots of people hire into organizations based on their workplace. So it certainly can be a big motivator for us, or help us with recruitment and retention, and especially as we try to diversify our workforces and things, and we do station tours. It certainly, we want a station that accommodates, diverse workforces and is appealing to people as a workplace.
So the order that you're going to have in the council meeting, so that order has gone through legal process as to what that financial statement has to be within the order. That order is then what will be used in the ballot. So now's the time to talk about, is that what you want to see? Are you good on that? If you aren't, then amendments will need to be made in the council chamber. But that's how it will look. We do need to get the ballots printed, So this is where we're at for needing to get this next step done.
Yeah, I think reiterate what Phil just said. It's time to talk about, kind of hash out. I would refrain from arguing against or for something right now, but definitely ask your questions and let's have some discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was asked by a couple of constituents when they saw this huge price tag and then all the interest payments and all that stuff, could this building or facility be done in phases versus one chunk block of money?
Yeah, I think Jill covered that. I think the thought is that you will see this broken down into more than just one bond, but the full amount is what's being requested up to that amount. But you will see it broken down, and then the facility. Those are logistic challenges that we're going to need to be working towards as Engine 2 moves forward. Where do we shift some of the staff? What does that look like? But some of that will all be logistics that we'll need to work through. The other pieces is that even though this is what was approved, the project then still comes back before you. We start looking at designs. All that starts to happen, but we need to have this amount process so that we can move forward.
Yeah, and the building committee came back with several comparable buildings that have been built throughout, I think mostly Maine. In all of those projects, did you guys take a deep dive into how they were funded and if there were any kind of creative ways to fund these buildings outside of a property tax levy or anything that we've already looked at here? I'm just trying to really turn over every stone and make sure that if there's a way to fund this besides increasing a tax bill, that we've looked at it and that we understand what our options are.
I think we did explore seeking some congressional funds. That was brought in at the $2.5 million. This isn't a project that you look for, at least we do not believe that this is a project you look for public-private partners with the size of this project that we're looking at. It's not that some projects, as we're talking about the aquatic center and some other projects, that you don't explore some of that, but not within this project. So you're really limited on how to pay for this, and part of that is obviously through property tax dollars, but also it's relating to what the state opened up and we talked about regarding TIFs. That's that other avenue that you have, and that we'll capitalize on that, just as we have since that state law changed. Every TIF that we've moved forward has had a 15% capture on each one of those projects. We'll continue to do that.
And just to reiterate, as Phil said, there are a few cities that have done public partnerships for public safety or municipal buildings, but each one of those cities have had unique extenuating circumstances as to why they chose that as the funding path. It's not the traditional path, and certainly for us, it wouldn't be the most cost beneficial path. And when you take a look at a number of those agreements, in the life of those agreements, you're looking at 30 to 50 years with ground leases, and it gets pretty complicated. And for what we're looking at, it certainly wouldn't be the best option for us.
I'd like to add a couple things, having served on the building committee. One of the advantages to this is that it's 3 existing sites. The committee looked at it with the chiefs and determined that, these sites were the best sites to just redo on Center Street and in New Auburn, and then do the combined on Minot Avenue. And the other issue that the consultants, A&E people talked about, was just cost of construction, and that as expensive as it is now, it's only going to get worse. So let's just bite the bullet and get it done.
It's a great point, Councilor. I think that, when I first came back before you, when we decided to move the PD, these costs have more than doubled since then. It's been those 12, 15, has it been 15 years? It may have. It's been a while. But those costs have doubled since then. more than. And so you're right. This is where we'll be. The need's not going to go away. It's just now how do we look at controlling costs, reducing impact on taxpayers, and that'll be the heavy lift that'll need to take place as we move forward and as we move forward with this bond.
And to add to that, not only are the costs for building new facilities going up, but the cost to repair that are the current facilities are going to continue to rise as well. So, you know, as we've said before, doing nothing, there's also a cost that's going to continue to increase as well with that. So something else to take into account.
Yeah, I would just do a little bit of a reminder as we go back to the many steps that this project has taken, and a lot of you were part of those committees. We really looked at a lot of options, renovating existing facilities, doing 2 separate stations, renovating one, trying to do something separate. And all of those were, an analysis was done on all of those. And with regard to the needs, making the assumption that we know we're going to have to make public safety infrastructure investments over the time, there really was economy to a public safety building, particularly around the site work and then the common and shared spaces that you would really be duplicating in a non-shared facility. So we did look at lots of options about whether or not we do 2 or 3 different projects to try to get that. Those were all explored, and pretty resoundingly, the engineering and the design showed that the most economical way would be to do a joint facility to get those economies of scale.
If I could, I just want to remind everyone too, it's like something Chief Moen said, now that we're growing, one of the goals of this city council was really about growing our tax base so we could pay for this. I mean, the police department located in the basement here was only supposed to be for 5 years. That was 10 years ago. That was 3 years, 13 years ago. Okay, math is blurry. But I know at that point, Auburn was not growing at all and hadn't grown for the previous 30 years, and it was economically difficult. And I can't go back in time and look at, the council's mind and the mayor's mind then and figure out what they were thinking. But now, if we continue on this good growth rate, it's not that it's going to force us to have public safety. It's going to allow us the ability to pay for it. Was something that should have been done and saved the taxpayers half the cost 13 years ago. So I think what we're doing is we're building that foundation, that base now. And if we keep continuing this trajectory, over the next couple of years while we slow bond out and while we retire additional debt in preparation for this, I'm hoping that net cost will be small and continue to decrease over time. So I think that's something we have to think about. But I also want to remind the council that our charter talks about the public approving these large capital expenses. My interpretation of the charter's reason behind that is not because people don't trust the elected officials, but that when you have something this large and this significant that's going to last hopefully 50 to 100 years, hopefully that long, sort of like a high school, that the residents of the city actually have a voice and can actually look at everything and make that generational decision and not just be confined to 7 elected individuals. So, you have to think about voting for this tonight, whether or not you want to send this to the public or whether or not you don't want to send this to the public, or if you want to amend something and make those amendments. But again, they have to go through legal. What is the absolute drop dead date, Phil, if amendments are made?
If amendments are made to this tonight, we're fine. We can make those amendments tonight, and we can still go to press and get these printed out.
I thought they had to go through legal.
I think what I'm talking about amendments is it's more about amounts than it is language. So we'll be fine if you choose not to bring this forward tonight and you want to move this and still get it on the referendum. We'll have to do some work with the clerk's office to see when you need to schedule a special meeting to make that happen.
Yeah, because it's backward planning from printing. Absentee ballots are due out, I think, on October 6th, or made available. So, okay. Is there any last questions before we take a little recess, Dana?
Yeah, real quick. So I know you guys did the building committee primarily. It was mostly last year, right? So are the updates, or sorry, are the estimates for the cost of this current as of now? Are we pretty sure that is the amount of money that we need?
So we did an updated cost, and so these are actually in 2024, 2025 estimate dollars was presented. So looking at the years that we would bond out.
Special meeting would have to happen before September 8th.
Okay. Is there anything else? We got a couple more minutes before we go into recess. Anything? Anyone? 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 Okay, guys. Thank you. Thank you, and folks, Jill, guys and girl. Thank you very much for the work on this, and we look forward to some other information later on. That's good. Okay, guys, ready? Two more minutes. Walk 3 minutes fast. Yeah. Good batteries this year in the budget?
Yes, so.
Yeah. Ready? Okay. I'd like to call order the regular city council meeting of September 5th, 2023. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Oh, we have 5 consent items on the agenda tonight. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Staples.
could I ask that items 1 and 3 be removed from the consent agenda?
So order 113 and 115 be moved from consent to new business, correct?
Yes.
Okay. We have, at that point, 3 items on the consent agenda tonight. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Staples, second from Councilor Whiting. All those in favor? Passes 7-0. So just clarification, just so everybody follows along, we're taking order 113 and order 115 and moving it to new business. Next, we have the minutes of the August 21st, 2023 regular city council meeting. Are there any corrections? None being, I'll entertain a motion at this time.
Motion to accept.
Second.
Councilor Walker, second by Councilor Stable. All those in favor? Passes 7-0. Now to communications, presentations, and recognition. Council communications. I'll turn it over to the council first. Council, any communications? Starting off to the left, Councilor Staples.
Just real quick, I met with the mayor and some of the representatives from Casella for recycling, and the mayor will give an update on that one, but it was a productive meeting.
Councilor Walker. Communication. Good. Councilor Gary. Okay. Mr. Manager, do you want to go before I do the
I'll save
memorandum?
mine for the report.
Okay, very good. I'd like to, if I could, take this memorandum and pass it down. There we go. We'll make sure, actually, can I get one copy out to Sue, the clerk? Folks, there's been a lot of talk recently about recycling, curbside recycling specifically. I put together this memorandum. We'll have it included in the minutes. We'll post it online for everybody to read. I am going to read it off to you right now and add some commentary as a way to bring this information up to the council for later deliberation. This is, again, to the Auburn City Council, CC Auburn City Administration, and the residents of Auburn, from myself. I recently requested a meeting with the City of Auburn's recycling vendor, Casella, to discuss the effectiveness of our city's recycling program. City administration and department heads, along with Councilor Staples, were also invited and participated in the conversation. We discussed both our historic bi-weekly curbside pickup and current consolidated program with the goal of gathering information on recyclable items, where they go, and to what extent our recycling is actually benefiting the environment once we factor in variables such as contamination, freight emissions, and off-gassing, as well as the commodities market. During this process, we identified some issues with our historic and current single-stream recycling program, from high contamination rates to lack of commodity market for certain items commonly placed in the recycle bin, to a lack of general knowledge on participation and efficacy of Auburn's recycling initiatives. These missing data points will be essential in helping the City Council, with the assistance of the Sustainability and Natural Resource Management Board, to make appropriate decisions when a new recycling contract is being considered in early 2024, and to determine the program's overall benefit to our environment. I am therefore proposing to the City Council a limited pilot recycling program that would have the following components: reintroduction of curbside recycling to select parts of the city with a mix of urban and rural areas. Increased pickup in those areas from bi-weekly to weekly. Definition of exactly what should be put into single-stream recycling For example, glass should go into household trash, and some plastics should not be placed in recycle bins. In partnership with Casella, increase public education on what goes into recycling and how to prevent contaminations, such as making sure residents are covering the recycling to prevent moisture, and that is, if that is not possible, holding on to it until the following week. Launch of a Casella mobile app to help participating households understand what should and should not be recycled. Distribution of Auburn-specific direct mail educational pieces produced by Casella. Periodic reporting of data collected by Casella to include recycling program participation by household and percentage of overall waste collected. Retaining the centralized drop-off containers located at Public Works for those who are not part of the pilot program and remain in the control group. By creating a new best practice pilot program with a statistically relevant sample size of participants, we can more effectively gather data on efficacy, participation, contamination, and more. If done correctly, this could become the standard model to use throughout the region, therefore influencing the recycling and reusing efforts. Incineration to produce energy is a reuse in surrounding communities. The cost of this pilot program should not exceed already budgeted and set aside amount for recycling for this current financial year. Details are to be worked out prior to and made available to the council during its deliberations on September 18th, 2023. Our goal is simple and remains consistent: to ensure that Auburn's government and residents are effective in their efforts to enhance global health and sustainability of natural resources using educated decision-making based on quantifiable results. The decision to add or modify a city program lies with the city council, not with the mayor or staff. It's my hope that implementing a short-term option will bring forth the information needed for educated decision-making during next year's budget deliberations. City staff will prepare specifics of the pilot program and will provide details and an order for you to consider at our next meeting. Are there any questions about this communication? So, in a nutshell, the specifics will come from city staff. And Phil, we were thinking about a pilot program that would consist of people with trash pickups on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, which includes Southern Auburn, if you would, mostly Southern Auburn. People that have a geographical farther way to commute into the Public Works facility for the consolidated recycling. And a very intensive, data-driven way to see if we can increase the participation in recycling, one, but also to ensure that recycling is actually happening. Well, I gave the example for the public that glass should not be put in your recycling. That is effective immediately. Glass does not get recycled. Casella verified that. It goes into a landfill in Old Town. Put it in your trash. Put it in your trash. Keep it local. It's by weight. It's just cost savings, and it does not get recycled. About half the plastics are actually on a list that does not get recycled as well. That will be part of the education program. Okay, and contamination makes up approximately 15% of the total that is being collected historically. We need to make sure we get accurate data. That's contamination, goes to a landfill, or gets incinerated at Maine Waste to Energy here in Auburn anyways. So we have to work on doing it better and doing more of it and ensuring there's a commodity market for what we do actually want to have recycled. Any other comments on that? If none, I'm going to turn it back over to the agenda. None? Okay. Next, we're going to have the first open session of the night. Members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business which is not on this agenda. Members that would like to speak, just please step up to the podium. Limit your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name and address. And again, if it's not on the agenda, if there's an item that is on the agenda, there'll be a separate public comment for that, of course.
Mayor Levesque, members of the council. My name's Art Dingley, 512 Danville Corner Road, Ward 5. When it first occurred to me to speak to the council on this topic, I planned to lead with a question. The question was, dude, where's my recycling program? Since then, I've found it at a nasty little facility out on 296 Grace Lawn Road where nobody lives and nobody goes. That's our recycling program. I'm glad that people are forming a committee to look into the possibility of someday doing something different. Hope you do. You should have been doing it 2 years ago. So let's talk about where we are right now, not where we may be sometime in the next fiscal year, after all the data-driven process is in. What you've got is an inconvenient, poorly managed, poorly designed, ADA non-compliant, hypocritical little facility out on Grace Lawn Road. Let me break that down because that's a lot of attribution in one sentence. It's inconvenient. It's a 16-mile round trip from my house to Grace Lawn Road. If I go every other week, which is how often I have to go to deposit the recyclables that I collect, that's 416 miles a year. In my truck, at today's gas prices, $75. When I add that to the tax increase you all gave me last year, thank you very much, that's a $1,400 tax increase. I find all of that inconvenient. It's poorly managed. The bins that you have out on Grace Lawn were poorly managed when they were at the trash to energy facility over on Goldthwaite Road. They were overflowing. Sometimes they were absent. Right now, you've got bins that are full. Over on Grace Lawn Road, you go from window to window to window down your line of containers looking for a place to put your recyclables. It's not well managed. It's poorly designed. The windows into which you're supposed to deposit your recycling material is about as big as a bread box. Why is that? That's because your contractor has welded sheet metal over the bottom half of all the windows. You can't take a tote full of recycling and upend it into the bin. You sure can't take my big recycling container on wheels and dump that. So what do? You stand here and take your recyclables a handful at a time and huck it into a little window. Why did they do that? Why would anybody weld sheet metal over the bottom half of a big window like that? Because they don't have to empty the bins as often if they do that. Very convenient for them, not so much for me. I'm picking up the little cat food cans and the Hannaford receipts off the ground that fall as I'm reaching into my bin and hucking stuff through a little window. It's just not well designed. It's ADA non-compliant. If any of you would like to meet me out on Grace Lawn Road and show me how, in a wheelchair, you negotiate 4 inches of loose sand and tree limbs strewn all over everything from the stump dump that's just adjacent, and from a wheelchair, throw your recyclable material up over your head into a little window the size of a bread box. Please, it's artdingley@gmail.com. Get a hold of me. I'll meet you there. I'll rent you the wheelchair. You can show me how it's done. And I'll take the video of it, and I will post that to the Disability Rights Project Maine.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Thank you. Am I done?
Yes, yes, sir.
Oh, that's how I know. It's when you say I'm done.
Yes, I just try to keep track of the
Thank
3
you
minutes.
so
That's
much.
the rules. Is there anybody else who would like to speak in this first open session of the night? None being, I'll close the open session. Get back to the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi, I'm Caroline Davison, and I live on Duneville Corner Road. I'm here about the recycling issue as well. I appreciate how intently all of you seem to have been following my neighbor, except I don't know, Mayor Levesque, why you weren't paying attention, but please pay attention to me. I just want to say that myself, speaking for myself, I'm really concerned how quickly our recycling program just vanished with very little discussion and with not even being on the agenda originally. But I just want to pass on an experience one of us had recently at the recycling center over on Grace Lawn, because there was an Auburn Public Works employee there, and he was fishing returnables out of the trash. And we had a conversation with him about what he thought about ending curbside pickup. And he said, if you don't like it, just do what we do over in Lewiston, throw it all in the trash. And that's not how I want Auburn to be. I don't know why this employee had that opinion, but I just want to say I think we always have placed a high value on the recycling. We think it's one small thing we can be doing as citizens here. And certainly our own city charter, there's all this stuff about being sustainable and being people who support trying to help our environment. So I'm glad to hear there's some effort going on to do a pilot finally, and we would certainly participate if we had that chance. But please, this is a really serious issue, and we'd really like it to be looked at very carefully and reinstituted. That's it.
Is there anybody else in the public who would like to speak during this first open session? None being, we'll be moving on to the agenda. Unfinished business, we have none. New business. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve order number 113-0905-2023, originally came from the consent agenda, approving the renewal of an auto graveyard junkyard permit for Randy's Auto, 899 Broad Street. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Councilor Staples, do I have a second?
Second.
Councilor Hawes on the second. Okay. Open this up for public comment. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak about this issue tonight? Now, bring it back to the council. Council, this was removed from the agenda item. Councilor Staples, you have the floor.
Yeah, sure. I got an email from a constituent last night about this one, and I just wanted to ask city staff what goes into inspecting these facilities, and what were the findings for this facility, from that inspection.
Sure, that's done through our code and planning department, so I'll ask Eric to come up and answer those questions.
Thank you, Councilor Staples. I know from the planning and permitting perspective, we're looking at the licensing standards, but also the state of Maine junkyard standards. And one of the challenges that we have with all of the licensed junkyards, really, we don't have any brand new licensed junkyards that have been designed to the current state law. So the sites in a lot of cases, and not necessarily Randy's to the extent of some of the others, are not in ideal locations. So we really focus on grandfathered junkyards, on inspecting to the operational standards that the state law requires continued compliance with, even if a junkyard sits somewhere where you couldn't permit a brand new one today. I saw one email related to Randy's junkyard today that a counselor had shared with me, and I think the focus of it was around whether or not that junkyard is contributing in some way to trash ending up in, or debris ending up in the Little Androscoggin, in particular at a site that we've been looking at for a potential boat launch. So I just thought it would be helpful to look at the aerial, that proximity. This is where Taylor Brook comes under the Washington Street and dumps into the Little Andro. There is some trash and debris evident in this aerial photo, and I know that this has been a site that's had a lot of encampment activity over the years. It's been cleaned up multiple times by either the city or in partnership with Androscoggin Land Trust, but it's not anywhere near Randy's Auto. And as you move up the river along Broad Street, you move up to here where Randy's Auto is. There's a significant distance, and this picture is about a year ago. It was spring of 22. But there's a significant distance between the back of Randy's active junkyard and then an elevated set of railroad tracks here, and then some additional woods before you get to the river. There's really no way, other than maybe dragging something by hand through the woods, that you could get something from Randy's to the river. So I'm wondering if that might be confusing the issue with another junkyard, but I don't think Randy's could be contributing to that.
Okay. Thank you very much. Bring it back to the council. Council, is there any direct questions for Eric? Any debate on this one? I will state that, it is very timely. We were just talking about recycling, and junkyards do fit in an amazingly important part of the whole recycling ecosystem. So I think looking at it and asking these questions are important, understanding how that all works, especially metal recycling. Recycling is important. If there's no further questions, I'm going to ask for a vote. I'm going to make it a roll call vote if I could, Sue. You just got back from vacation. We'll give you a couple seconds.
Councilor Staples?
Yes.
Councilor Gary?
No.
Councilor Whiting?
Yes.
Councilor Hawes?
Yes.
Councilor Milks?
Yes.
Councilor Morin?
Yes.
Councilor Walker?
Yes.
Passes 6-1. Next is Order 115-0905-2023, taken from the consent agenda item earlier today, approving the renewal of an auto graveyard junkyard permit for Dawn's No Preference Towing, DBA Moore's Auto Parts. It's at 940 Washington Street North. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Motion, Counselor Haas, second from Counselor Moran. Open this up to the public. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this renewal? If not, I'll bring it back down to the council. Council, and, well, there we go. Eric's got it right up. Council, open this up to any questions or comments. Councilor Staples?
Sure, yeah.
Open this up.
I had another email on this one. And I mean, just looking at the map here, I can see what the concern was. How are we going to prevent this this facility from putting anything into the river that we don't want in there?
Yeah, this is a tough one, and this is probably the best example of probably one of the worst locations you could choose for a junkyard, but it's been there since the 40s. I'm guessing based on the soil types around the peninsula, and it's really the whole river in that segment is large oxbows that have shifted over time and left other segments behind. There's a lot of sediment movement. I'm guessing that most of that peninsula is fill from the 40s and on, maybe when Washington Street was constructed. It's still in the floodplain. It's still in the floodway. So when the river floods, it cuts across the back 2/3 of that peninsula. I'm sure there's a lot of junk over that 60 to 80 years that has ended up in the river. We've been, in my time here, and the file looks like it was even before I was here, we've been working with them to meet the operational standards and make sure that they're not expanding their footprint. They're too close to the river, but that footprint has been there since before we had all of the standards that we have today. I know there was some discussions with EPA to buy them out decades ago. We could look at whether or not there's some funding source to do that. This is a site that shouldn't be a junkyard forever, but they really have, with the new management, complied with the operational standards to a substantial degree compared to what they used to. There's no vehicles with fluids, mercury switches, oils, antifreeze, that are allowed to be stored in the portion of the property that's in the floodplain. That's something that they're doing pretty well complying with. We had 1 out of 15 vehicles last week that still had fluids in it in that area. We don't check every vehicle, but I try to pick 10 to 20 each year. So we went back, did a follow-up inspection today, and all 15 or so were devoid of fluid. So they've put in place a process where they are trying to drain them before they store them at the back of the lot. Again, it's a terrible location for a junkyard. I think long-term the city should look at what we can do to not have it there. But I don't think as staff we have the authority to require that they stop using it as long as they meet the operational standards at this point.
As a point, just as a point of process, if we were to not approve this license, what happens?
I think eventually we'd have to decide if we were going to take the owner to court for operating without a license. And we've done that before when there were operational violations in the past, and given them a period of time to come into compliance. As of today, we were out there, I did find one bumper that was probably from a late enough model car along the shoreline that I would say it was put there in the last 5 to 10 years by either flooding or by somebody dropping it. The rest of the debris that we found, the water's a lot lower now than it has been for much of the summer. The rest of the debris that we saw along the shoreline was old enough that I couldn't even guess the age of it. And they've picked up a lot of that over the last 10 years or so. But I think every year when we have high water, there's going to be more stuff exposed along those bankings that have been deposited over the decade. So,
And it's under new management?
I believe it's the nephew of the manager for the last 50 years or so has taken that over. He's made improvements to the screening fence. He's verbally explained some of the other things that he plans to do to make improvements over time. But it's a terrible location. It was built when you could still build it, and we've really focused on the operational stuff, and they've done better operationally than they were under the new management.
Does it have the potential to be declared a Superfund site?
So I was told by the owner that it was on a short list of junkyards to be bought out in the 80s. I don't know if it was under the Superfund program, but they bought some in southern Maine, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, and this one didn't make the cut. I think it's worth continuing to look at whether or not that's an option. But it is an active business that isn't growing beyond the grandfathered footprint.
Is this at all being used for recreation? Is anybody kayaking, fishing around this, anything of that nature?
So I think there's certainly people on the river passing by. I don't know exactly where they put in and take out, but there's certainly people canoeing, kayaking, boating along the river.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was contacted by a couple constituents that do get in the water with their boats and things, and they like the scenic view, but when they come close to where the bank ends are in that place that you were saying, they're finding stuff all over, and I kind of wonder if it's going to be a safety hazard, because if they're not paying attention, they're afraid it could, run over something or run into something or catch something. And they were also concerned with that rapid rain that we had. They were afraid maybe that had washed in a lot of stuff or uncovered a lot of stuff. And is there any way, I know it was just brought up, that we could look for any sort of funding sources to clean the rivers up? All around where they're located, because we're trying to promote more and more river activity, and it don't look good if this is all there.
I think we can ask a question. A, is there any testing that's been done in this area, in the water of this area, that would indicate that there's leaching that's happening or off-gassing from the buried autos?
I don't know. I know we've had many enforcement issues over the years at this site. EPA has, Army Corps has for filling. They've been corrected, I think, at this point, but it's a terrible location for a junkyard.
Yeah, and I think I'd recommend to the council a two-pronged approach and look at what happens in scenarios like this. If the council did not renew the auto license export, you effectively close the business down. That business closes down, the owner walks away. He or she is insulated by corporate barriers from liability for the most case, okay? That's it, they walk away. If you approve this and then engage in a mediation plan, that will probably produce a better outcome than putting a business out of business. So that decision ultimately is up to the council, but try to apply some business experience to that and see what the best outcome for this council would be and how to appropriately get there. Councilor Staples, then Councilor Orr, Councilor Lund.
Eric, has he met all the requirements that you've asked him to meet this year?
So it took a couple of inspections, but he has all the fluids drained in the floodplain. He has properly stored mercury switches. And he does have some cleanup to do along the riverbanks, but I don't think any of it's new material. I think it's things that, even if we closed them today, every year we'll see new stuff emerge from the sand that moves around along those oxbows. So yeah, he has met what the operational standards are. It's the locational standards and just general cleanliness that we struggle with at that site.
Do you see a path or a list of steps that could be potentially accomplished that would allow this facility to continue operating in a way that would be safe to the river?
I don't think that you can make it safe to keep the debris from moving around within a floodplain. I think there always could be a flood event that would move some materials around. But in the past, we were advised to focus on the operational standards, and that's what we've been doing. And we could work with the property owner, see if he has an exit plan, and see if there's another way to pursue funding a cleanup out here. It's an eyesore. It's always going to be an eyesore on an access corridor. It's just not an attractive use, and it's in a bad location. But it's been that way since the 40s, and we can't necessarily just pull the plug on it.
Mr. Mayor, can I recommend that the council table this to the October, I believe it's 18th meeting. We will, we've had situations in the past when we've worked with this property owner to come into compliance, and he's gone beyond his license date. That's an enforceable action by the city. So tabling this does not prevent him from still operating, but then it allows city staff, administration to explore what your potential options are moving forward. So I'd recommend that you table this to that second meeting in October.
Move to table this to the date
Certain.
specified by the manager.
Second.
October 1st or 2nd? 16th? Okay. Got a motion on the floor to table this to October 16th. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Councilor Whiting. Okay, all those in favor of tabling this to October 16th, date certain? Okay, passes 7-0. Okay. Okay, continuation of new business. First is next is order 11809052023, authorizing the city manager to execute a real estate transaction to swap city-owned parcel 271-100-000 for privately held parcel 261-056-002. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Councilor Gary, second by Councilor Walker. Open this up to the public for comment. Anybody in the public like to comment? All the information for this is in your packet. None being, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, any debate or questions on this motion, or excuse me, this order? None being, ask for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? None being, passes 7-0. Next is ordinance 11-09052023, approving the text amendment to the Auburn Code of Ordinances front setback, or excuse me, section 60-548B, front setback principle for traditional downtown neighborhood T42B, as shown in the citizen petition submitted on June 12th, 2023. This is a public hearing and first reading. Do I have a motion? Do I have a motion? Councilor Milks, do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, now you all jump in on that one. Counselor, I'll give it to Councilor Staples. I'll open this up to the public. This is a public hearing. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak on this ordinance and the citizens petition? Please step up to the podium and limit your comments to 3 minutes and give us your name and address.
Stephen Beal, 575 Johnson Road. My understanding is that the staff has recommended against adoption of this proposed ordinance, and I support the staff's position on that. There are two reasons. First, this is the very issue that's currently in litigation relating to setback requirements, and all of the briefs in that Superior Court suit have been filed, and everyone is awaiting a decision. It seems premature to make a decision to change the ordinance now when it's already being contested. The city may be right, the appellant may be right. No one knows for now, but we'll know soon, and it should be decided one way or the other before there's an attempt to change the ordinance again to reflect this. The second point is that this petition was retroactive to cover previously existing, previously taken action. And I believe that that's an illegal thing to enact an ordinance that by its own specific statement is intended to be retroactive to cover an action that was previously taken on a project subject to this ordinance at Stable Ridge. Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak on this order? Not being a closed public comment, bring this back to the council. Council, just as a reminder, staff recommended that this not be passed as it is addressed effectively in the legally reviewed language that's going to happen in the next order. I will say, though, I was impressed to see residents come forth and actually stand up for their new neighborhoods in which they lived in. A lot of people that signed this, if you looked, were from a Stable Ridge area. And this is what that lawsuit was pertaining to. And a butter actually is suing the city of Auburn to stop that project from happening. But when you review the language in the planning board meeting on it, it was pretty common that it was going to be a setback from a public way, a private way versus a public way. So this does get clarified in the next order in which you will be reviewing, so it makes this order kind of, if you would, irrelevant or redundant. So I'll throw that out there. Is there anybody who would like to talk about this? If not, I'm going to ask for a vote, and I'll ask for a roll call vote on this. Sue?
Counselor Staples.
No.
Counselor Gary.
No.
Counselor Whiting.
No.
Counselor Hawes.
Nope.
Counselor Milks.
No?
Counselor Morin.
No.
Counselor Walker.
No.
Okay. The order fails first reading out of 2, 7-0. Next is ordinance 12-09052023, approving the text amendment to the Auburn Code of Ordinances, section 60-548, B, T-4.2B, section 60-54B, intent and purpose, section 60-54B-.1, building placement on lot, frontage build-out, 3. Section 548B.2. Common or porch yard, stoop yard, frontage, storefront type, building envelope, articulation, ground and upper story building facade. So public hearing and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Councilor Milk, second. From Councilor Moore. I'll open this up to the public. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak about this?
Good evening. My name is John Cleveland. I live at 183 Davis Avenue in Auburn. I want to speak to just one specific part of this particular order, and that is the part where the language is included to make changes to what the setback requirements are in 4.2B, which, as you indicated, was similar to the language they had in the previous petition going forward. I want to make 2 points about this language. One is that language as being asked to be changed tonight is exactly the issue that is before the Androscoggin County Superior Court, which has been fully briefed and is waiting for the judge's opinion in regards to whether the current language allows what this additional language is asking to do. The city briefs argue that point. So 2 things happened here. One, if the city prevails, this language is totally unnecessary because you will have prevailed in your argument by your city attorney. So this is not necessary. Second point that I want to make is that if the city doesn't prevail and the plaintiff prevails in this particular motion, and I want to make the point that the process that was followed was the one outlined in your own city ordinances when the citizens of this community want to contest actions. Followed all the rules that are currently in the city and state ordinances to do that. So what happens is that if the plaintiff prevails, then all of the public hearings that you have on all the rest of these 4.2B map changes would not have existed at the time those public hearings were held in the planning board. And so therefore the public would not have been aware that this significant change would have occurred retroactively if you pass it now. And that really doesn't allow the public to have a full understanding of what those impacts would be in all the rest of your 4.2B. I think it's inappropriate and unnecessary and no urgency to add this language at this time. And I would strongly recommend that you remove that language and let the court proceeding go forward as it should be, as outlined in your own ordinance.
Is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak on this? If not, I'll close public comment. Bring it back. I just want to caution the city council about receiving and understanding legal advice for people who are not admitted to the bar. It's usually bad form to do so. Okay, so I'll leave it at that. I'll open this up to the council for debate. Council discussion, debate. Councilor Mills?
Mr. Manager, this particular ordinance, you've had legal review?
Yeah, I'll have Eric come up and speak. It certainly has gone through legal, and Eric can discuss it.
And there's just so people know that aren't on the city council, there's a lawsuit against the city on this ordinance. So we've expended some capital already, around 10,000 or so taxpayer dollars to defend on this. So there is activity, but there's also intent, and we'll let Eric speak about that a little bit.
So we have had this reviewed by our legal counsel. There were some changes made to the language that was included in the petition. One of the biggest ones was that it said that you shall measure the front setback from a shared access way or parking area. We changed that to the word may, so we can still encourage a project to build out the public street frontage, but also encourage shared access ways that don't come with new city responsibilities to build out housing into the parcel and not leave the backs of the parcel undeveloped. We think that that was clear in the existing ordinance. That was the intent. The comp plan called for that. There was discussion at the planning board and council level in adopting that language to allow for that. But we also saw that there was value with the pending lawsuit challenging that very provision in having something that is even clearer, that has less room for challenge in the future. And then while we were doing that, there were some other changes related to 1 and 2 family home, building window and door percentages, and having more flexibility for a homeowner that might be building a 1 and 2 family home to do that without an architect doing full design plans with window and door fenestration, that we wanted to work into that. So yes, we have had it reviewed by legal. We think that the ability to build out the entirety of the lot so that we can build out the street frontage, prioritize that, but then to also build into the interior of the lot to create the density on the entire parcel is important.
So the root of the, whatever, it was a mistake or the planning board, there was some technical error of some sort.
So I don't think that there was a technical error on that part. I think it was deliberately discussed in the adoption that we wanted this flexibility in the T42B, and then when that was repealed, we wanted that in the T42, and then when that was repealed, we wanted the flexibility in the T42B to make sure that these, an in-town small lot is built out with a structure that is up on the street that matches the traditional pattern of the street. But these larger lots, we would be leaving the back part of the lot completely undevelopable. And I think it would be illogical to say that you can only build a building on the front, and then beyond your parking behind or on the side of the building, there's no room for development in the rest of that parcel. The planning board approved it based on the language that's in the ordinance. There was specific discussion about it in the adoption and the approval, that was what the ordinance said. Staff believed that's what it said, the board believed that's what it said, but
There's no intent from the planning board, and this was, everybody thought they were doing the right thing.
We think the ordinance already allows for this, yep.
Right, and
But
then
if there's
a
room to
suit.
argue, then we might as well clear it up, and we had the petition pushing that timeline.
And we've been sued by an abutter.
Yes. Challenging the planning board's approval of the project.
Okay.
Mayor, yeah, so I was going to ask about the timing now that the petition came in, and the way the charter works, the petition needs to be seen within a certain amount of time, and so that is why this is coming to us now and not waiting until something is cleared through another quarter or whatever, right? I mean, that's what's driving this to come to us today.
Yeah, so the first one that was voted down, number 2, that was just voted down, that was really being specifically driven. The timeline was being driven by the petition. Our legal counsel had concerns about the retroactivity that petition called for, similar to what Mr. Beal had raised. And we also didn't want to force a development to build with their setbacks on the new shared access way. We still wanted the ability to build out the street frontage. That is a goal of the form-based code. but then also that they may build along a shared access way so that we could get the full lot development to include not only the frontage build out on the public street, but also on the private shared access way. So this is not subject to the same timelines, but it was an attempt to merge it into something workable that made the ordinance, I guess, bulletproof, so that you can't read this any other way, even though we believe it allowed for that anyways.
And I can see here that the planning board supported it 6-1, so there's support.
Before the suit, did Mr. Harmon come up and talk to you at all about what happened before he sued the city?
Councilor Mayor, I'd rather not get into the details of a pending case that's pending, but I think you have the information that's available to move forward.
What part of the case is actually public? I mean, granted, there are certain responsibilities because we're being sued. We're the defendant on this, the named defendant, and the plaintiff is Jeff Harmon. That's filed in Superior Court. His pleadings within the case is public. What should we, obviously, the merits of the case?
I think that what you're discussing tonight is the order that's before you regarding the action that the planning board took in response to the petition that was filed by the citizens. So that's your action this evening. If you want a discussion, workshop, whatever, regarding the lawsuit, that's separate. And so tonight, you're looking at the planning board's and staff's response to the citizen petition.
Yeah, no, and I can see that. I can see
I'm
a response. Response from council is, derived from public comment and the nature of the suit, which is interesting. But I will encourage the council, if you guys want to talk about this publicly, and I think it should be public, transparent, so people understand that we need 2 counselors to recommend that to be added to the next agenda. At this point, is there any debate on the merits of this ordinance, either for or against? If not, I'm going to ask for a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If there's any way that this will jeopardize the lawsuit and make it null and void, when it should have its day in court to have the judge rule it up and down, then no, I can't support this.
Okay. So, Mr. Mayor and Council, this is a standalone action that you're taking that will not have any impact on the decision that's now currently before Androscoggin Superior Court. So this is a standalone action that you have the authority to take, and as was said, I think through Councilor Staples' comment, that initiated through a citizen petition, which by ordinance, the staff and the planning board had to move to hit those dates. This is a response to that citizen petition. So any action you take tonight has nothing to do with the decision that's currently sitting at Androscoggin Superior Court.
Any other debate or comment? Any other opinion upon the merit of this in court? If not, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote.
Councilor Staples?
Yes.
Councilor Gary?
No.
Councilor Whiting?
No.
Councilor Hawes?
Yes.
Councilor Milks?
Yes.
Councilor Morin?
Yes.
Councilor Walker?
Yes.
Passes first reading, 5-2. Next is ordinance 13-0905-2023, approving the zoning map amendment T4.2B and C/OS, area A1. This is a public hearing and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Councilor
Second.
Staples? I'm sorry, second?
Second.
Councilor Haas? Okay, open this up to the public. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak? Remember, this is a first reading, public hearing. There will be a second reading too, the second meeting in September. Anybody from the public? Nobody? Okay. Mr. Hayes, are you standing up?
I guess before I begin, this is with respect to the rezoning of a specific area, or is that yet to come?
It's a specific area, Mr. Hayes.
Okay. What is before you results from a flawed process and a number of flawed actions. Just for the record, Bob Hayes, 172 Allen Avenue. The flawed process started with the flawed action of bypassing appropriate comprehensive planning initiative and allowing a select few to rewrite maybe 3 chapters as plan updates and accepting those rewrites as a new comp plan. The next flawed action was a drive-through windshield survey focused only on building setbacks, which does not serve as a foundation for form-based planning. Another flaw is the renaming and subsequent application of Form-Based Code 4.2 from traditional downtown neighborhood district to a traditional neighborhood development district. The next flaw in inappropriate action was 2 councilors, and I suspect the mayor, meeting one evening to prepare to have the council direct planning staff to advance the renamed 4.2 from base code for application across hundreds of thousands of acres consisting of many different neighborhoods. A flaw and an irony arose in replacing use zoning with form zoning when only page 1 was the focus of a 10-page specifics of form-based planning. And the actual focus for almost all discussions was on page 1, which was essentially use. Not necessarily the last flaw is now the confusion, which actually has been focused upon in the last 2 discussions surrounding building setback and resulting in questionable interpretations. I encourage the council to vote this article and the ones that follow on at least table to allow more public discussion over the next 2 months and to ultimately for the public to speak at the polls this November. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this order and this map? Mr. Manager, can you clarify some statements or some of the accusations of illegal meetings happening on this order?
Mayor, not without specifics, but I'm not aware of that. I think that if there's something that should be brought forward, then we should address it. What I was, when you had asked while Mr. Hayes was speaking, what I was saying was that if you as a council would like to challenge something that the public comes up to speak about, you have every right to do that.
Okay.
So, and you can do that during your debate. Just one more note on this, and Eric might have been is going to address it. I'll do it now. The documents that you have before you on the information sheet for this item and the next 2 items. If you look at the last, when it looks at previous meetings in history, there's a typo that the meeting, there's a date on here for September 21st, 2023. That should have been August 21st, 2023. It's on the next 2 documents that you'll be bringing up as well. So I just want to make sure you had that clarification.
Council debate, comment? None being, I'll ask for a roll call vote. I'm sorry?
Counselor Staples.
Yes.
Counselor Gary.
No.
Counselor Whiting.
No.
Counselor Hawes.
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Counselor Morin.
Yes.
Counselor Walker.
No.
Passes 4-3. Next is ordinance 14-0905-2023, approving the zoning map amendment T4.2B and C/OS Area 2. This is a public hearing and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. Second, Councilor Milks. Second by Councilor Morin. I'll open this up to the public for comment. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? If so, please step up to the podium. Give us your name and address and limit your comments to 3 minutes.
D. Chapman, 40 Vivian Street. On August 8th, the planning board voted not to change the zoning on A2, the 24.2B. I'm getting educated on this. I'm asking that you remove all of the Area 2 altogether. They did not get this zoning wrong when they did this years ago. And I welcome anybody to drive that neighborhood. I also feel that I've been doing my homework on the LD 2003, in which I would welcome everybody, please, we're voting on some very important things on our zoning. So I've been doing some homework, and there's some municipalities that are doing a great job. Southern Maine, I sat there today and read all of Southern Maine. Very apparent how they're going about it. We're spending too much time on focusing on all our rezoning and not really what LD 2003 means. So I recommend that everyone do their homework, please, because it will help all of us. I feel like we've been bullied with the LD name-calling, bullied by passing these zonings because of this LD 2023, 03, that's coming up. There are a few people also, before I get to a few things that I've learned on the LD, that would pave all of Auburn if they had their choice. We need to slow down. We've changed enough zoning. And what is the big hurry? Why we're putting the cart before the horse? We haven't even done studies on water and sewer and our roads, but yet we all want to change the zoning. Please, I'm begging the council, pull it back. Let's slow down. Take a look at what we're doing to our community. So a few of the things that I've learned in the LD 2003, Section 4 allows density in certain areas. Also, there's a difference, and I'm glad Eric brought up may versus must, because it does state may. So I'm so glad you used that term. May consider to manage these requirements in a way that best suits our community. That does not mean all of Auburn. That means we get to choose as a council, as a city, as citizens, we get to choose where we want this LD 2003 to take place, if you want to come into compliance with it. With that, why do we feel the need to change so much zoning? We've changed enough, the traffic, the value of our homes, the sewer. So really quick, Sanford, I'm sure you guys watched the news. A grandson and a grandfather were killed. And a lady spoke on the news, and this is what she said. She said, since they put these developments in our neighborhood, the traffic has been horrendous. It's been awful. People are flying and taking no consideration of our once quiet community. And that was on the public news. So I would ask and plead with the council, please remove the A2 from this. It doesn't even welcome, I mean, look at the small parcel you're talking about. It's all downhill from there. Please really listen to the citizens and let's hold back on some of this zoning. I think we need to put the brakes on. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak on this? I will take some time and clarify LD 2003 as the law states after public comment.
Good evening, Mike Adler, 82 Loring Avenue. I'm here to ask you folks tonight to put an end to this madness. This zoning has got to stop. We're taking one little piece there, trying to rezone it just so one person can develop a piece of land. It's got to stop. We've been going at this left and right for years now, from the first time the first person came in and we had meetings at Walton School. We've all been called names. We've been called NIMBYs. We've been called anti-development. We've been called anti-housing. Been called complainers with no solutions. So let me just give you a solution. And you know, we're not dummies, because we're back here all the time fighting for what we want. And that's our neighborhood the way it is. So the solution I have is for, if you have a person that comes in, we know that you can put certain things into this piece of land already zoned the way it is, without even changing it. Okay, that's fine. Let the person come in with a plan. Let him go to the abutting neighbors and talk to the neighbors. Let him go and get the petition signed by the neighbors, not from people on the other side of the city, which is what this petition is for this one here, to be rezoned. Lost my place. Once he does that, and if it's approved, then he can do his building in there. But this person that's doing this now doesn't want to do this type of building that's already allowed because it's not cost effective. So here we are, back again, and I don't know what it's going to take, but the last time at one of the meetings at the Walton School in the gym, one of the people in the area got up and started screaming at the developer. That developer pulled that project. That project is now right next to Fairview School. Yeah. But what's it take? What's it take? We elect you folks up there to represent us, to look for our interest. Our interest and why we live in that neighborhood is because it was a single-family neighborhood, not where we want something like that sits on top of Court Street, right in the middle of that neighborhood. If you look there, it's right next to the conservation place. All I can say is I'm asking you, we elect you to vote for us and listen to us. Please vote to get this out of here, kick it out, throw it out, and put it out the window to pasture.
Is there anybody else?
Bob Hayes, 172 Allen Avenue. Just clarification. There were two members that I know that did meet, because you, Mayor, did call me.
Councilor Hayes, is this about this ordinance right now?
Well, yes, I'm clarifying what I spoke to before, and something I said has been challenged, and I just have to be sure that the council recognizes that I was called, and I know one other was called, by the mayor to join two councilors to talk about this form-based 4.2 and how to push it through. Thank you.
Bruce Ryu, 85 Mary Carroll Street. The issue that I have with the wholesale changes that we're making to our zoning maps are that, like Stable Ridge, who I think is owned by a woman from Scarborough, the 1,000 acres that were up for discussion in Danville that is owned by a man from Falmouth. This section number 2 that we're trying to get eliminated in the Houston field in this ordinance here has a developer from Brunswick or wherever. It seems like these wholesale changes of zoning are inviting developers from Falmouth, Scarborough, Brunswick, Portland, and they're going to build these buildings, and the buildings are going to be not owner occupied. And we in New Auburn, the section that we're talking about now, all own the residence that we live in. And so your vote to change the zoning there makes a wholesale change to the entire neighborhood. And I think any counselor that sits over here and lives in a residential area who all of a sudden you look in your backyard and you can have a big housing development put behind you, you're going to be saying the exact same thing, that we have changed the entire look of the neighborhood so that all the residents in our neighborhood no longer are taking care of their property. They're from away. And so I would ask that you slow this whole zoning change down. If somebody has a specific area that they want to develop, I know that might be called spot zoning, but maybe spot zoning is what we should look at. If you have a specific area, like the buildings that are being built next to BJ's, makes sense to me. They're not hurting other residents. So it's just something I'd like you to consider. Thank you. Keep our residents owner occupied.
Okay, I'll now close this last open session. I got to clarify, open session, I'm sorry. Debate on this agenda item. So a couple things I need to clarify. First of all, the developer in Stable Ridge lives in Auburn and has for 30 some odd years. Most, except for one, new development in the past 3 years has been originated from people living in Auburn. So just want to make sure that's clear. Council and staff, you've been asked tonight by some members of the public, and I understand, but you've been asked to frankly break the law at the state level. Now, don't take it from me, but my job in the charter is to provide you information. Spot zoning is illegal. You can't do it. So we can't, that's not an option. LD 2003, I was part of the legislative committee that helped draft it, spoke about it. I was at this bill signing. I was with Governor Mills when it was put in. I saw it. I spoke against the 2.5 multiplier. As long as there's city water and city sewer and it's not in a watershed, it's approved. Form-based code is the best option we have now in order to prevent. That's why we started it early, years ago. It's not a rush job. In the legislature, there was modifications to LD 2003. Namely, any community under, I believe, 10,000 had until July 1 to implement, but any city over 10,000 had until January 1 to implement, if not LD 2003 takes effect. Again, this is legal. Mr. Manager, you might want to, at the second reading, have a memorandum on how that affects specifically this area, because I think the people of Auburn need to know, and I think we all need to look at what your options here are. Looking at the comp plan, looking at the growth areas, and taking everything into consideration, including the neighbors. And I understand where they're coming from. I completely do. But I also have to bring up, it's my responsibility to bring up any potential legal issues or conflicts with state law or city ordinance. And Mr. Manager, I'd like your thoughts on that as well, or as a follow-up in the subsequent meeting. There is 2 readings here.
Yeah, staff will work together with legal to provide you information for your second reading.
Okay. Debate. Questions?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll just say I live in this zone, in this area, which makes this one particularly difficult for me because, I take the planning board's advice on these issues quite seriously. The planning board voted this one down, and so I think I'm gonna go with the planning board on this one. I think I will not support this one because I trust what the planning board has recommended here.
Any other comment?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of history, and it goes back a long ways here. People do not like the idea that they may build 3- and 4-story buildings in this area. But one of the big things that's going to come along, that a developer is going to build over 200 apartments on this piece of land before it's over. So you better be ready for another big battle, because it won't be far away. And I will not vote in favor of this either.
Any other comments? Councilor Gary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Form-based code, originally the concept was for it to be in our downtown areas. Somehow through time it's been morphed into and reached out into all the neighborhoods. I do not believe form-based code belongs in all of our neighborhoods. I'm not going to vote for this tonight.
Anything else? If not, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote. Oh, Councilor.
Just one quick question. With LD 2003 coming out, what would happen specifically in this location if that was to be enacted January 1?
We'll have additional zoning changes that will need to come back to the council for a lot of Auburn to be compliant with LD 2003. We will have to allow, is my understanding, on individual lots that are undeveloped, we'll have to allow at least 4 units. That could be in a single building, could be in 4 separate buildings. There are other circumstances where a house exists where you can add 1 more unit or a couple more units. We'll be going through all the details of that to make sure we put something in front of you and the planning board to come into compliance with that. I think the biggest change is through some combination of 4-unit buildings, 2-unit buildings, 3-unit buildings, single families. We'll have to allow 2.5 times the density that the zoning district, the underlying zoning district allows. If 51% or more of the units are income and rent restricted, as I believe it's less than 80% median, don't quote me. 60% median income. If those are restricted units, so you'd have a situation where in this urban res zone, you can do 6 units per acre. But if 50% of those units are income and rent restricted, then you could do 12 plus 3, 15 units per acre. So essentially what T42B allows. But it obligates half of them to be rent and income restricted.
So theoretically speaking, how many units would LD 2003 allow on that property right there?
90 times 2.5, 180.
At 15 units per acre.
225.
I don't remember the exact acreage on that parcel. I think it's over 10 acres. I think it's more closer to 15, but 10 acres would allow for 150 units. I think that lot's a little bit larger than that. So somewhere between 150 and 200, I think.
Okay, let's just use 200 as an example. So 200 units, if LD 2003 comes into play, right there on that spot, if T42B is enacted, do we have the ability to say what units can and cannot be put in that area?
So I think in either scenario, there would be a set of standards that somebody would have to meet, but if they meet those standards, they should get their approval. I think the biggest difference would be a similar number of units that would not be rent restricted versus rent restricted.
But if we put
Or
in
income.
T42B there, and we're meeting the requirements of our zoning, and it meets state level, but we have the ability to dictate what units and what types are put in there, we have a little bit more say at the city level rather than the state telling us what to do. Is that correct?
I think the form-based code has, either zone has standards that would dictate what can be built there. I don't know that one would give you more control than the other. But either way, the standards would have to be met in order for somebody to get their approval.
Thank you.
I guess T42 would allow for larger than 4 units per structure, which would be different, I think, than LD 2003. So you could do more than 4 units in a single building, but the density ultimately would be similar.
Any other questions, comments? Okay. At this time, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Counselor Staples.
No.
Counselor Gary.
No.
Counselor Whiting.
No.
Counselor Hawes.
No.
Counselor Milks.
No.
Counselor Morin.
No.
Counselor Walker.
No.
This order fails 7-0. Next is ordinance 15-09052023, approving the zoning map amendment T4.2B, Area C. It's a public hearing and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion, Councilor Staples. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Councilor Hawes. Open this up to the public. Are there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this? This is a public hearing. Just step to the podium, give us your name and address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Bob Hayes, 172 Allen Avenue. I addressed this more on a overall view, and I think it's come up that, form-based planning really is supposed to be built upon neighborhood characteristics, the naming of neighborhoods, recognizing neighborhoods, and doing a thorough description of those neighborhoods and look at the uniqueness of, and then form-based planning to support that character to survive and flourish. Unfortunately, and I've written this before and I've said it before, I'll say it again. The public continues to witness a flawed top-down process. Unfortunately, the planning board should have been given time to properly and adequately reach out and engage the public through the neighborhoods. And again, I go back to that drive-through windshield survey that was done that focused just on setbacks, and that seemed to have been a foundation that sparked this whole process. we speak, and we didn't go to 4.1, which is another code that does allow expansion outward from the downtown. 4.2 is a downtown code. It seems ridiculous that we're trying to color that across acres of our, suburban and even some rural areas. But anyway, the question comes up too, why didn't we go to 4.1? Because 3-story apartment buildings were designed to be everywhere, anywhere. And if we're gonna go through 3-story apartment buildings, we better have elevators. Because right now we're ignoring the downtown. We have a lot of residential properties that we have some elderly people in. They would probably like to, maybe at some point, downsize, maybe go to apartment. But if we're building 3-story apartment buildings without elevators, a lot of those elderly people are not going to be going to those apartments. So we're not doing ourselves any justice. As a closing remark, I just say that, to me, haste is making waste, and I really question our future looking at property values. Some of it's coming down from the state, but at the same time, we have to recognize our mayor was part of that process at the Augusta level, so we can't blame it all on the state, because we've been involved.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else in the public like to speak? Just for the record, our property values in Auburn have gone up significantly, as shown last year when we were the 10th hottest real estate market in the country. So back to this, and just I want you to refer to the agenda too. We've been working on this, I believe. Form-based coding was introduced to the City of Auburn in 2016. So we're pushing 7-8 years. This specific area has been talked about for at least 2.5 years. Open this up to the council. Council, any debate? Any comments? None? Ask for a roll call vote.
Counselor Staples.
Yes.
Counselor Geary.
No.
Counselor Whiting.
No.
Counselor Hawes.
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Counselor Morin.
Yes.
Counselor Walker.
Yes.
Passes 5-2. Next is ordinance 16-0905-2023, approving the zoning map amendment T4.2B, Area D. This is a public hearing, first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Staples, second from, I'm sorry, Councilor Hawes? Okay. Open this up to the public. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak? If so, please step up to the podium and give us your name and address. If you could, limit your comments to 3 minutes. None being, I'll bring this back to the council. Council, comments, debate? None? Okay. I'll ask for a roll call vote at this time.
Counselor Staples.
Yes.
Counselor Geary.
No.
Counselor Whiting.
No.
Counselor Hawes.
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Counselor Morin.
Yes.
Counselor Walker.
Yes.
That passes 5-2. Next is ordinance 17-0905-2023, approving the zoning ordinance text amendments, proposal B1, amendment section 60-145 and section 60-146 of Article 4, District Regulations, Division 2, Agriculture and Resource Protection District. This is a public hearing and first of 2 readings. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second for Councilor Morin. Okay, I'll open this up to the public. Anybody in the public like to speak on this? This is a series of ordinance changes, clarifications for the Agricultural Resource Protection Zone.
Stephen Beal, 575 Johnson Road. I'm a member of a large group of citizens and landowners with agricultural and forestry and farming interests who participated in formulating a proposed draft ordinance last spring. There was some concern expressed at the workshop that was held a couple of weeks ago that this process had been somewhat rushed and was being brought forward too rapidly. To the contrary, this was a very deliberative process. There were proposals for ordinance amendments, a total ordinance change that were made by different elements, and the planning board adopted what came to be known as Proposal B at its meeting in June, but there were some revisions that were felt to be necessary to smooth the text out, to make it more understandable, to make it easier for the staff to administer. So there were some proposals by Mr. Sear of the Planning Board, some by our Agriculture and Resource Protection Group. The staff coordinated most of those together in this proposal B1, which contained elements 1 through 8. Some of those originated with our group, some with Mr. Sear. Several of them were identical or virtually so, and those were consolidated together. There was another proposal that Mr. Sear made, which will be before you a little later as B3, and yet another one by Mr. Trask of the Planning Board that is B2 that will be before you shortly. This addresses B1, which were presented as 1 through 8. There was one of those that was deleted in the actual proposed ordinance votes to be taken because, as the staff has indicated, that one relative to conservation cemeteries had actually been adopted by the council back on May 1, and the reason it didn't appear in the ordinance change adopted as Proposal B by the Planning Board and by the council, second reading July 10, was simply because the staff typing hadn't caught up with the enactments that the bodies had made. So we're in favor of 1 through 7, which are actually numbers on the list. They are 1 through 5, 7, and 8. 6 was not recommended by the Planning Board, and we'll stand by that. Item number 4 was one that was Mr. Sears. I don't think he's here tonight, but we'll let him speak in favor of that, which is one that was in his list of proposed amendments, but not our group proposal. Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak on this first ordinance? No? Okay, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, just to clarify, I have heard mention about this group of agricultural people. This is not a city group. There is no public notice of meetings. There's no transparency. We do not know the membership or makeup. This is a mirror group, if you would, of one that's duly appointed, okay, and worked on. It's our Agricultural Resource Protection Working Group. That's under the Sustainability and Natural Resources Board. But this is a separate group. I just want to caution that when you have groups that are out there forming and quoting decisions without any minutes or without any verification, I am concerned about that, and I just want to make sure that you're keeping that in the back of your mind. Is there any other debate? Questions? Comments? No? If not, Councilor Staples?
Yeah, sure. I would like to just, recognize here that the planning board supported these amendments. She's reading this over the weekend a bunch of times and looking at it right here. I just want to make sure that we're looking at the same things. So there's one here that the planning board did not approve, and that does not show in the order. So it looks like all of the approved planning board amendments here are in this order, and the one that they did not approve is not.
If I could just clarify, number 6 here is the one that the planning board recommended against. I just wanted to make sure it was an active decision by the council for what actually passed tonight.
Thank you, I appreciate that. There's just so many things here. I just want to make sure I'm not misrepresenting it.
Just to clarify, number 6, Councilor Staples, was the addition of or 400 feet, whichever is less, in section 60-146?
Correct.
Okay,
That's
just want to make sure. Thanks. I'm sorry.
So as the planning board did not recommend that one, I'd like to make a motion that we strike number 6 from this order. And I'll specify, this is striking or 400 feet, whichever is less, to section 60-1463C after the word lot.
Second that.
Got a motion on the floor to amend. 1 second, please. Is it in there or not? But is it not? Okay. I'm sorry, just give me it. It's in there? Right, but it's in the ordinance. I just want to make sure that what you're asking for is actually in the ordinance. So,
I went over this a few times myself. I have the same thing happen.
yeah, so it doesn't hurt to be redundant. So I have a motion on the floor to eliminate 60-1463C as made by Councilor Staples and seconded by Councilor Walker. Is there any debate?
Mayor, I just want to make sure Eric clarifies this. So Eric, the order that they have right now includes 6 accounts. The planning board recommended not to approve the 400-foot setback.
Correct, and that is number 6,
And that
the
is number
400-foot setback.
Okay, and that is still included in the draft ordinance, so that's what we're getting at.
It's in its, the planning, there's a requirement that the structures be in the front 30% of the lot. This would have added or 400 feet, whichever is less, and planning board recommended again.
I just wanted to make sure it's not, that language is not in the ordinance, but we have it, it's good. We got a motion on the floor. Any debate on the motion to amend? None being, all those in favor of the motion to amend the main motion, please raise your hand. Okay, passes some, all those opposed? Passes 6-1.
And I'll work with the city clerk, but I think that will allow me to prep the final version without that piece in there for second reading.
Do I have any more motions or amendments or debate on this order? If not, I'll be asking for a roll call vote.
Councilor Staples.
Yes.
Councilor Gary.
Yes.
Councilor Whiting.
Yes.
Councilor Hawes.
Yes.
Councilor Milks.
No.
Councilor Moran.
Yes.
Councilor Walker.
Yes.
Passes 6-1. Next is ordinance 19-09052023, approving the agricultural resource protection text amendments, proposal B2. Planning board proposed change number 10 to section 60-145A1B7, prohibiting the housing to be sited on land that has been enrolled in certain state of Maine current use programs within the last 5 years. This is a public hearing and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Are we skipping one? Didn't we have a Taylor Pond one that we missed?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I stand corrected, please. I'll stand back here. Next is ordinance 18-09052023, approving the zoning ordinance text amendments, proposal B3, amended section 60-145 and section 60-146 of Article 4, District Regulations, Division 2, Agriculture and Resource Protection District. AGRP text amendment, proposal B3. Planning board proposed change number 10 concerning prohibiting housing in the agricultural resource protection zone in the Taylor Pond watershed. Taylor Pond watershed. This is a public hearing and first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Staples, second from Councilor Walker, and Councilor Whiting. Thank you for that correction. Open this up to the public. Is there anybody in the public that would like to speak on this ordinance? None being, I'm going to bring this back to the council. Council, debate, discussion. This was the recommendation for planning board, and this was not to pass, correct? Mr. Cousins?
That's correct.
Okay.
Not to add that restriction to the Taylor Pond watershed.
Very good. Is there any debate on this? Discussion? If not, I'm going to...
Just a quick comment. I think that when that amendment was added at the planning board level, it was felt to be sort of too big of an issue to be taken that quickly. There's certainly some debate that we could have about development in the watershed, and with making some, creating new standards and trying to make it better for the watershed, the Taylor Pond watershed. But to go to that level just based on what, level of discussion we were having was not necessary, inappropriate.
Yeah, I'll add too. I mean, I think there's some merits in taking a look at what the development we allow around the water is, the Taylor Pond watershed is. I feel as though this is maybe too broad of a brush, and I think to take a better look at it, I think is something that maybe we should do. But at this point, I don't think this makes this. I can't support this as it's written, so I'm going to be voting no.
That's a roll call vote at this time, then.
Councilor Staples.
No.
Councilor Gary.
No.
Councilor Whiting.
No.
Counselor Hawes?
No.
Counselor Milks?
Nope.
Counselor Moran?
No.
Counselor Walker?
No.
Fails by a vote of 7-0. Next is actually ordinance 19-09052023, approving the AGRP text amendment proposal B2, planning board proposed change number 10 to section 60-145, which is prohibiting housing to be sited on land that has been enrolled in certain state of Maine current use programs in the last 5 years. The public hearing, first reading. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Staples, second by Councilor Hawes. Open this up to the public. Any members of the public that would like to speak, so please step up to the podium. Give us your name and address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes, please.
Stephen Beal, 575 Johnson Road. We are in agreement with the staff recommendation against this proposal. Personally, as someone who has a substantial amount of woodland under the tree growth law, I'm familiar with that law, and I have no intention of removing it from tree growth. But if I were to do that, there's already a very substantial penalty imposed by state law. And there are two different ways of calculating the penalty, and they're both pretty onerous. By far, the largest number of parcels in Auburn under one of these tax deferred or tax preferred programs is under the tree growth law. The others are open space and farmland, but they have far fewer parcels than those that are under tree growth. The penalties are very substantial under the state law, under the tree growth statute, and I think it would be a form of double penalty if the city were to impose another kind of penalty by restricting use if you've already paid the penalty under the state statute to remove your parcel from this tax preferred program. So we support the staff's recommendation against this amendment.
Is there anybody else from the public who'd like to speak on this? If no, I'll bring it back to the council. Council, debate, comment? None being asked for a roll call vote. Sue?
Counselor Staples?
No.
Counselor Gary?
No.
Counselor Whiting?
No.
Counselor Hawes?
No.
Counselor Milks?
No.
Counselor Moran?
No.
And Counselor Walker is out of the room.
Okay, the motion fails 6-0. Next is order 119-0905-2023. Authorizing the proposed public safety building to be placed on the referendum ballot and submitted to the voters of Auburn at the November 7, 2023 election. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Whiting, second by Councilor Moran. Open this up to the public. Anybody in the public like to speak on this issue, please step up to the podium, give us your name and address, and if you could limit your comments to about 3 minutes.
Good evening, Andy Titus, 24 Rubelite Lane. First, I just want to say, for full disclosure, I was on the Public Safety Building Committee that a couple of years ago we put together and looked at some options. But I must say, myself and at least one other committee member were taking it back a bit to know that this is going referendum. Because it was talked about 2 years ago, but we thought there was going to be a lot more discussion, a lot more options looked at before we decided to take this large step. One of the things that wasn't noted in the workshop, and I don't know if it'll ever come out, but we talked about the tax impact on 3 options, and we had 3 options starting with $26 to $7 million to do some renovations, all the way up to what was the price tag at that time of $40 million to do 3 buildings. And the tax impact was anywhere from $350 to $600 per taxpayer, per property, based on the options that we chose. That's a pretty significant hit. And I don't think we've looked at the options enough. It appears as though the Sheriff's Department thinks that a vacant Subaru building makes a good public safety building. Have we looked at anything else other than building this building? I don't think so. Or if we have, we haven't vetted that, and we have a committee that could been looking at that. I was hoping that when we get this committee together, that we'd go and visit sites, and we'd go talk to experts and see what other options were available other than just $40 million for a building. That didn't happen. It was during COVID, understandable, but I thought maybe once COVID was done that we'd go back and meet again. But that didn't happen either. So I would just ask you guys, I know you're in a hurry and you think it's an emergency now, and everybody's telling you that we got to do this, and I'm saying we got to give it another chance with the safety committee to look at what options are before we go to the referendum. Not only that, if it doesn't pass, what do we do then? If it does pass, then a lot of people are going to be hurt financially. If it doesn't pass, then this could be in jeopardy, at least this particular kind of building. So I just wish that we had more time to talk it over. Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the public that would like to speak? Now, bring back to the council. Council, debate, discussion?
I think Councilor Titus brings up a really good point. So what if this doesn't pass? Then it just
Doesn't pass.
just doesn't pass. Dies on the vine. And the thing is, this is an important project. We get to make these types of choices once in a lifetime, hopefully, and that's it. I want to make sure that when this does happen, and I think it needs to, that we've set the community up with all the information that they need to make an informed decision, and that will give them the confidence to support this project. I don't know if we've done that yet. We have 2 months before the election. Not to say we don't have time, but I want to make sure that we get this done and done right. And I get that we don't have a whole lot of time to make this decision. It's pretty much this meeting or we don't do it. And that part is troubling.
Point of clarification, there actually is a process, and very similar, and I'll get to your Councilor, but I want to clarify that, very similar to what we had in the high school. Okay, we send it out to bond. The people make a decision, which is per charter, on large purchases. And then final design plans and so forth, they come back to the city council for final approval and or modification. So there are multiple steps here along the path. This is about bonding an up to amount. I just want, for a point of clarification, there are multiple checks and balances throughout this process.
So the final bond number, that's one thing that's kind of a sticking point for me. We talked a little bit about this in the workshop. So this is an up to 45 million. I get that building costs are unpredictable at this point, right? And I think we have an idea of what it's going to cost, but 2 or 3 years down the road, I mean, what is it? I'd like to think that we could lower that 45 by 2.5 million since we have the congressional earmarked funds. And I wish we could lower it a little bit more from the TIF funds that we've already approved, but I just don't see what that number is. Is there any clarification? I know that we talked during the workshop about potentially using those TIF dollars to pay down the debt. But is there any way that we could get ahead of that and say, look, we know we have X dollars, whatever it is, and today, could we say we know we could lower that bond ask down by, is it $1 million? Is it $2 million? Whatever. I don't know what that number is. Does the city manager, do you have that?
So council, you can make any amendments on the amount. Basically, by ordinance, you have to push back to the community for the voters is anything greater than $9 million. So if the project is greater than 9 million, then it needs to be by referendum. And that's based on a percentage of what our existing budget is. The request and the recommendation from the staff was, and from the bond council was that this project could be up to that $45 million. If you remember, very similar to the school bond, there was many people that were stating, why are we putting the full amount on there when we know the state's paying part of that bond? Because you are bonding that full amount. We, again, if we receive other funding, that other funding might come in different means, which means that the full amount will need to be bonded. How it's paid for can be done however you decide as a council. And so, as I mentioned during the workshop, it could be TIF funds that were brought in, it could be applied to that amount, or when it actually comes down to bonding, you might say, well, we've already received the $2.5 million. When you actually go out for bond, it could be less that, but it could also be at whatever plan you finally decide to move forward with. So if you, through that total process that the mayor had just discussed, you may determine that that site's not the right site. You might determine that the building that's being recommended isn't the right building, but you still have the authorization up to that 45 million. I think as best as we can communicate to the public on what it looks like, what the plan is critical, so they know what they're voting for. But then ultimately, you do have that final say, as the mayor said, same as the school board when they moved forward with the new high school. Modifications were made because costs were increasing. So some pieces within that project didn't make it all the way through because of cost increases. However, they determined to keep it at a certain amount. So there's still a lot of room in there for the council to move forward with this project process long beyond whether or not the taxpayers pass it or not.
Yeah, and I would just say that, assuming this goes to the voters and it does pass, then that will certainly be one of the major goals of the next council, right? To continually refine this process and to determine if there are other ways and other revenue streams that we haven't explored to make sure that this is paid for as fiduciary responsible as possible. I know that's probably not a word. But okay, I get it. Thank you.
Is there any other comments?
I'd just like to add that the deciding factor for me, and I respect Mr. Titus, and one of the is he and I we agree on a lot, but there's occasionally we disagree. But in this particular situation, I am in favor of passing this, because in the multiple times I've heard from both chiefs, is that this is about the people that work for the fire department and the police department, and that, things like cancer, and it's people's lives, and the facility's out of date, and it needs to be updated, and the decision is here and now, and I realize there may be a better, but it's been well thought out, and the time is now, and so I'm making the decision based on the information in front of me and based on our professionals, that at this point, this is the right thing to do, and we'll send it to the voters, and then they can finally decide. But I think for our people, that sending this to the voters at this time is the right thing to do.
Councilor Whiting?
Yeah, I agree with Councilor Milks that we owe it to the staffs of both police and fire. But also, because we talk about so many things over so much time, we tend to forget some of the, benefits of doing this. And one of the things is operational efficiency, but also energy efficiency, better buildings, better envelopes, staffing issues, we will do better on that. So in terms of economics, it's actually better economically too, compared to running old, obsolete stations, which are actually inadequate or even, in fact, dangerous in the case of the fire department.
Councilor Whiting, I had a question. You're on the committee as well. You've been in the council now for 2 years. We've had several meetings with this council and workshops, talking about this topic, correct? Public comments and so forth. Okay, I just want to make sure that everybody knows that it didn't stop when that committee, the Public Safety Building Committee, ceased meeting. It continued in the body. Okay.
Just add that it's been, I think, thoroughly vetted, and it's just we have to revisit some of those sort of sales pitch items that we talked about before that we need to bring up again. They're not just a sales pitch, they're true beneficial aspects of this project.
Any other comments? If not, I'm going to ask for a vote. And oh, you had something? Sorry, you got to stick it up in my eyes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I support our firemen and our police department, and I know this is necessary. I know it will be a cost savings from having to keep putting Band-Aids on the existing buildings. It is kind of like a big sticker shock. I feel with these numbers, and I know my fellow counselors and city staff and Mr. Mayor have come up with, scenarios on how this is going to get lower eventually, and it's just numbers on a paper. But when people look at this at home, this is more than just numbers. They look at how they're going to survive, if their taxes are going to go up, and the whole 9 yards. I would have I mean, I know I was elected to make the tough decisions, and I'm going to be making one. But I would like to see more concrete evidence and have these numbers lowered. I'm not sure how we can get this lowered. And what will happen if people get that same sticker shock and they worry about their taxes? Or people that have rents that they're afraid their landlord's going to go up because of the taxes going up. What are we going to do if this is not passed by the voters and this is something that needs to be done? Do we have another plan? Can this be brought back again?
Any other comment? If not, I'd like to call for a vote. Sue, roll call vote, please.
Respectfully, Mr. Mayor, I would like an answer to that question. If the voters don't pass this, what would our next recourse be?
You're back to the drawing board. Roll call vote, please.
Counselor Staples.
Yes.
Counselor Gary.
No.
Counselor Whiting.
Yes.
Counselor Hawes.
Yes.
Counselor Milks.
Yes.
Counselor Moran.
Yes.
Counselor Walker.
Yes.
Passes 6-1. Next is Order 120-0905-2023, allocating $5,700 out of the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds, for literacy volunteers, Androscoggin. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. Councilor Gary there, and we're going to give that Moran on the second. I'll open this up to the public for public comment. Anybody in the public like to speak? No? Hey, this is great. They reached out to me too last week. I was really impressed with their mission. I wish I knew a little bit more about it before then, but I'm glad we do now. We have a handout here explaining what Literacy Volunteers in Androscoggin County does. They have seen a decrease in their attendance significantly due to COVID, but they're seeing a rebound. This, to me, is a model for nonprofits for built-in obsolescence, and hopefully they will never be needed again, but let's help them now. All those in favor?
Mr. Mayor?
Nope. Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From what I was reading, this amount of money is only going to help about 30 people. I would like to make a motion to double this amount of money. It's such a very little amount, and I know we have enough with the $400,000 in the opera money to do the double. I mean, if we can, like we did last week, double.
I have a motion on the floor to double it.
Yes, please.
Okay. And did you also, okay, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Councilor Staples, I just want to let you know that it's not, the amount of money doesn't dictate how many people they help. It's the amount of need that's there. So right now, their need is dictating. If we apply more money to this problem, it doesn't generate additional need. I do think that we put an asterisk. My recommendation to them, if you need more because of a surge now and users, please come back to us, okay? Because the money is dedicated to the need. It doesn't create the need. Councilor Whiting?
I'd just like to comment that Talia Chamberlain is an extremely frugal individual, and when I served on the CDBG advisory committee, she would come in with a request for a very modest amount, year after year. Some of the other nonprofits would come in and ask for double what they got the year before. She would come in and ask for the minimum. So I take her at her word. She's asking for this. This is what she's requesting. I think this is what we should approve. And if she needs more money, she'll come back and ask. But I give all the credit to her. This is one of the best organizations in the state.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Thank you. That's actually great to hear. Is there any other comments on this? We have a motion to amend on the floor right now to double the amount. 11,400 total. All those in favor of the motion to amend, doubling the amount, please raise your hand. All those opposed? Fails 6-1. Okay. Now we have original motion set up for approval for $5,700 from ARPA funds. All those in, is there any other comment?
If they need more money.
Come and
If
ask.
she needs more money, come and ask. Because I'd be in favor of that.
Okay. Like to ask for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? I'm being passed 7-0. Next is Order 121-09052023, authorizing the city manager to execute the purchase and sale agreement of 80 Lake Street, PID 239-114, 7 Fern Street, PID 239-113, and 9 Fern Street, PID 239-112. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Councilor Gary, do I have a
Second.
second? I'll give this one to Councilor Staples. Open this up to the public for comment. Any member of the public like to comment on this? Please step up to the podium. And as we wait, I will just brief for people at home. This is something that we set up as an RFP, looking for specifically childcare as a potential. We explored that. I was personally involved in some of those tours and conversations. Unfortunately, state ordinances make it almost nearly impossible to rehabilitate an existing school to meet the needs of a preschool. Yeah, that's a long story.
How did you the names and you made the selection?
If I remember, the sheet was blank. So, yeah, maybe that was it. It's been a long summer. So that's the background. Nobody's here to speak on. I'll bring it back to the council. Council? Debate? Conversation?
Well, I guess I should say something, seeing how it's my ward, huh?
Yeah.
I mean, when it first came across, our desk, what we were really trying to do is, how do we repurpose, an existing building that gives life and the ability for children to still be able to play and have a safe place to go. So, granted, this is going to be turning into housing, but what I like is, community garden aspect. They have the basketball court coming in. They have the the daycare. They have the playgrounds. This is what Ward 2 is all about. And having that nice home feel and having a place for kids to go. My kids and I, we go to that, we walk by every day with the dog and we go, play on that structure. But having more things there is just very beneficial for every kid around there. So I'm in support of this.
And just to clarify, there's only going to be an estimated 10 to 12 units being built in that building. They'll keep the existing facade and the footprint. And the child care proposal is off in the future, and that will be a brand new construction versus a rehabilitate. And we are, after studying it, there's a lack of child care in that entire area, significant lack of child care, which is preventing people from actually working.
Yeah, I think that Auburn has a proud history of our community schools, and I think whenever we have the opportunity to move an existing school into another school and to have a new school that's bigger, better, and does its job, you always wonder about what happens to the pre-existing building, and I think the worst thing that we could have done would be to tear it down. And I'm happy that we have a plan here that has makes this productive building, and keeps it, and preserves it. And I think that, generations to come can enjoy it in the space that we're creating here with the playground.
Very good. Councilor Gary and Councilor Whiting.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think this is an excellent project. It will blend in and not detract from the neighborhood. Everybody will feel welcome and be able to have a place to go and congregate, make new friends, and build the neighborhood. And I commend this developer for coming up with his plan and bringing it forward.
I'd just like to add, I think it's a really great landscaping plan. It's very sensitive to the neighborhood, and it's a local developer. So I think it's a win-win all the way around.
Okay. And just a little bit more history on this. This came out, this whole proposal, potential proposal came about when the finance committee, which I'm on for the school department, started doing an analysis of cost effectiveness of our schools, specifically Lake Street. Not only is this happening, but we're also saving money from bonds that were meant to update the school prior to a financial study. When we conducted that financial study, we looked at the fact that it was just not viable with 9 students. So we're saving money and actually adding the community. Good project. Sue? Actually, I don't need this. All those in favor, raise your hand.
Can I make one more recommendation?
Yes.
If we have the opportunity, I know that there's good lighting there. I'm assuming that there's going to be more around the parking lot. I'm just afraid, kids at night playing around. I just want to make sure it's well lit as well. So just take that.
I'd give a recommendation to send an email to the planning board under a PUD. It'll have to go through PUD approval process to the planning board. Great point. All those in favor? Opposed? None being passes 7-0. Last open session of the night, members of the public are invited to speak to the council about any issue directly related to city business, which is not on tonight's agenda. If you'd like to speak, please step to the podium, give us your name and address, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. None being, I'll close open session, bring this back. Oh, we do? Sorry. Yeah, just jump right up there like Jack in the Box.
Sorry, I was worried that I missed it. So Corey Wallace, 93 Gamage Ave. I have a question partially, but mostly a comment for the property of 67 Minot Avenue, the old mill building that's across from Argent, next to, I think, the old sheriff's department. I was just wondering if there's been any update about what's happening with that structure. I know it was purchased to be a health hotel of some sort by a foreign company. It's a fascinating property, and I'm really enamored with it. I was just wondering if there's any way that we could look into turning this into some sort of nonprofit housing of single units. I mean, just counting the windows, they're about this scale here. You could get a good 75 on just a single side of it. So I'm just kind of putting that out there. I know you have a long history of videos I was actually watching, and I actually biked over here while you guys were live, so that was a pretty interesting experience. But so I don't know if there's any kind of development on that property, if there's any kind of look towards it. It has been just dormant, possibly because of COVID. I heard it was for visa reasons, but just a general comment, question, any kind of interest.
Normally, Mr. Wallace, thank you very much for that. I mean, I haven't seen you here before. Awesome. Glad you came. Love to hear more about that bike experience. We can email you if you give us your email, or just hand it to Jay real quick. In short, there has been a lot of talk about that building. There is work happening, and we will give you some newspaper articles, and whatever we can share publicly with you, we will. Okay? But thank you for this. Anybody else in the public like to speak? None being, I'll close the open session. And we're going to bring it back to reports. Okay, real quick, September 9th is right around the corner. That's Saturday, 1 o'clock in Festival Plaza. Please join us for the 3rd or 4th annual Blues and Brews Festival now. It's a great event. It's going to be a lovely day, around 80 degrees. We're pretty happy about that. I'm sure the guys in the audience are talking about that right now. Also, I'd like to point out we have new college housing in our downtown. So if you all remember the Value Inn on Center Street, it's now the home. It's been remodeled, rebranded, and it's now the home for 126 Mustangs. So students from Central Maine Community College, and from everything we're seeing, they're adding some vibrancy right into that little section of downtown. It's pretty exciting. If you ever thought we were in a college town, you'll change your mind when you drive down Center Street. Last week, I had a meeting I set up with the governor's staff. Eric Cousins thankfully joined me to keep the conversation flowing with some good examples, specifically talking about bipartisan infrastructure law, federal funding, and the Inflation Reduction Act funding that was passed at the federal level, that's flown to the State House, and looking at grants. We did discover some very important things. That namely, the state has no program right now to expand water, sewer. Excuse me, folks in the back, it's just extremely disrespectful and frankly distracting. If you could take your comment out in the hall. Thank you very much. That there is no grant program to expand infill water and sewer. And that would be something that they took. They didn't realize it. So hopefully we're going to start seeing some programs at the state level too that help fund some of the infrastructure improvements here within the city of Auburn. That's it. Mayor's report. We got school committee meeting Wednesday. Edward Little did open. Everybody that was there, thank you very much. It was a great day. We had about 4,000 to 5,000 people, roughly, come in throughout the entire time. Football games have happened. There has been some issues. You will hear of something being broken. Oh yeah, there's stuff that's breaking. It's natural. We want it all to break soon, if it's going to break, because we got a 1-year warranty. Okay, so things in new construction on a $121 million facility are going to break. We're going to get through it. So we'll give you periodic updates throughout the next couple months as the auditorium opens up and so forth, and as the school gets finished. Any other reports here before I turn to the city manager?
Yeah, sure. I went to the school opening, Edward Little the new Edward Little. Wonderful facility. It was really exciting to watch the public get a chance to explore that place and to see all of the new classrooms and especially some of the vocational classrooms. It was just really impressive to see the variety of different offerings that our high school students can take now. really gave a good sense of community pride, and it seemed like it was just generally positive all the way around. So hats off to the whole city for this one.
Thank you. I was also there, and I was looking for the big plaque, and I couldn't find it.
That I have no idea where that is, other than I have seen the draft, and it is being created. I just don't think it's done yet.
I, like my other fellow counselors, had the privilege of visiting the new high school. I just think back to when I graduated in the late 90s, and comparing what the experience, what the facilities, what the opportunities they're going to provide the children of this community compared to what was just back in the 90s is the contrast was pretty stark. Really impressed with the vocational facilities. I think that really gears the young people in this community towards being able to be impactful to this community in a positive way. Everything about it was wonderful. I visited with my wife, who was also a graduate from in the late 90s, and allows my son, who's 7, by the time he hits the high school, I'm sure the old school will be down and the new fields will be up, and that beautiful facility will have a bow on it. And I'd also like to say, if anybody's ever looking for a very rewarding opportunity to donate their time and volunteer, I was a conversation partner through Literacy Volunteers. It's really impactful just being able to sit down with somebody that doesn't have English as their primary language, and just getting used to having casual conversation, being able to converse is just a very fundamental thing that you need to feel like you're part of the community. So I'm sure they're always looking for volunteers. Wonderful program, and proud that we could carve out some money to help them continue that.
Any other reports, committee reports? Councilor Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too went to the school open house. It was amazing to hear the people that gave speeches and stuff, and to look out into the parking lot. I mean, I wasn't paying attention to what was going on in the parking lot because I was mesmerized by a lot of the different speeches. But I turned my head and I went, oh. You could see people all the way down in the parking lot, in between the cars, and then, heaven help me, I don't move quick, but I had to move quick when they started, after they cut the ribbon and the door opened. I had to really pull over because they went in that quick, and everybody, they were starstruck. They couldn't believe the facility, how well it turned out, and it was, and kudos to the staff that worked hard to put everything together between city staff and school staff. We've got a great team, and we need to commend them more.
Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Just a few items. One, as we're talking about school, a partnership with the school was to rehab the tennis courts at East Auburn School. That project is complete. The grand opening for that will be officially opening on Monday. It'll be 2 new surfaced tennis courts with the ability to also have a combination pickleball court of 4 courts on that space. So great job from our team within Public Works and school maintenance, which is now under Public Works, to do the lifting on that project and get that completed. Also, we had the PAL movie night last Friday. We had 100 people attend that. So it was a great turnout. It was a great night for it. And then also, as another reminder, if you want to hear more about City of Auburn, Absolutely Auburn is the podcast that we have set up. Staff is currently taking turns doing different topics. There are 4 episodes out, so I encourage you to listen to those podcasts, learn a little bit more about the city. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We don't have any executive sessions, so I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Councilor Hall, a second from Councilor Moore, and all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nah, we now stand adjourned.